ICQ Podcast episode 310. Grow, merge or disband your amateur radio club. Well, hello fellow amateur radio enthusiasts and welcome to this, our 310th episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported this episode by our monthly and subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB is joined by Chris, Mike 0, Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike 0, Sierra Golf Lima, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, Ed, DD5 Lima Papa, and Bill, November 3, Juliet India X-Ray, to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is our recording from the RSGB convention of Grow, Merge or Disband Your Amateur Radio Club. Well, as always, to keep the podcast advert free, it's your support and donations for the value you find in the show that keeps us advert free. This episode, no one-off donors to thank, but our monthly and annual subscription donors who continue to provide us with a base to pay our way are greatly appreciated for their support. You can join them by visiting www.icqpodcast.com/donate, where say whatever value you find in the show that you prefer to send our way, rather than the usual podcast way of sending you stuff you don't want in advertising, will be greatly appreciated. Now let's move on to our news roundtable in this episode. We'll join Martin, Chris, Frank, Ed and Bill to discuss the latest amateur radio news, including can online exams improve accessibility and the ARRL evolve communication. As always, guys, really hope you enjoy.
Hi, Mrs. B here. The guys thank you very much for your downloads. However, there are a few things that would help the ICQ podcast to continue to grow. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We need you, and it's free. 73's Mrs. B.
Well, hi guys, and welcome, I should say hi guys and gals, and welcome to episode 310 of the ICQ podcast, and this episode's News Roundtable. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH. Hi, Chris.
Evening, Martin. I'm glad I managed to get the gremlins fixed. We were struggling a little bit there, weren't we?
Oh, tell me about it. Hopefully, it's going to be okay.
I think so.
We're recording in a completely different way tonight, so it'll be interesting, put it that way. Hopefully we'll be okay. I've also got Mr. Martin Rothwell M0SGL. Hi, Martin.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks very much, Microsoft Skype. Oh, dear. Anyway, good evening.
Yeah, well, you got hit with a Skype update and it killed everything like I did. And
well, yeah, I've got a Windows update that won't take on my big computer, which also took an update for Skype yesterday, which now won't load at all. So now I'm running on my laptop and a secondary sound card plugged into my main microphone and hoping that it stays up for the duration of the call. But not cool, Microsoft, not cool.
Yeah, and I also had a Skype failure as well, so which doesn't help matters. No, yeah. Sorry, I also had an Audacity failure, which doesn't help matters. Okay, well, less of the moaning. We also, the other side of the pond, we got Mr. Frank Howell K4FMH. Hi, Frank.
Hey guys, running Linux, no problems on this end.
Cut him off now. Seriously, cut him off now.
You're too happy, Frank. In Germany, we have Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP. Hi, Ed.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good to have you, Ed, mate.
And others.
And others, yeah. Yeah, not everybody's a gentleman, I know. And back over to the pond, we have Mr. Bill Barnes, N3JOX. Hi, Bill.
Good evening, everyone, and I have power again.
You have power again. Yeah. So,
Can you tell them you don't have a
were
generator?
hitting everywhere.
Yeah.
No, we don't, my connection is currently not on the generator. So
We'll sort that out.
yeah,
So if you suddenly vanished then, Bill, we know where you went.
yeah, I'll text.
Okay.
Put your cell
let's-
sites up.
dear.
That's
It's
true.
gonna be a
Cell
fun
sites
one.
on top of the building. That's right.
Has it been 10 episodes since episode 300?
It's
Hard to believe.
certainly has. We've had a lot of extras. We've had a lot of content. There's still a couple more to go. So we didn't intend to release weekly. We didn't intend it, but we've just had so much content. We've been busy, and it's been good. It's been good. I think we've enjoyed ourselves. We've been out and about a lot. Well, we'll tell you what we've been doing, but we've been pretty busy. Anyway, let's start with the news stories. PACTOR developers, SCS, announced a monitoring software. And interesting because there's problems where you're not allowed to send encrypted data, certainly this side of the pond. And your side of the pond, Bill, you're not allowed to go over a certain bit rate speed, are you?
Yeah, we're currently limited on HF to 300 baud due to legacy issues. It'll hopefully be, everywhere else in the world it's by bandwidth except here. But SCS, the folks that created PACTOR, have given out a free monitoring software that runs on a Raspberry Pi. It's a binary. I grabbed it last night, downloaded it, and tried to play with it this morning. It works, It's I have my Raspberry Pi 3, and I updated it to Raspbian 10 from Raspbian 9, and then added in the SCS repository for PACTOR. Loaded in their PMON, plugged in a sound card, plugged in the KX3, and then tried to find some PACTOR signals this morning, which I didn't find any. But it's all baked in there, so it can monitor PACTOR 1, 2, and 3, and says that PACTOR 4 is coming in the spring. It actually does the compressed messages. It'll actually decompress the messages, which that's one thing that's a lot of people were concerned about. So between that and the folks at Windlink making the message database of send and receive available online for people to go look through to make sure everything's legal being sent, they're definitely making some strict motions forward to try to get some of the rules changed and address the concerns that the community has over here about Windlink, PACTOR 4, going over 300 baud, all these associated issues. And, Frank, when was that last emergency hurricane where they were allowed to use PACTOR 4? Was that like 2 months ago or something like that?
No more than 3, Bill, I think. So
yeah, because they did get a temporary,
they got a temporary, and then I think they extended it for some other shorter period of time. So it turned into a window of opportunity to use this.
Yeah, and because the reality is that you for the same amount of bandwidth, PACTOR 4 gets more traffic through than PACTOR 3, and so they want to make this a permanent thing because it is very useful during times of disaster. And like I say, I didn't hear any signals yet. I will report the next time, but at this point, the software loads. It works with the sound card. It's receiving. I just got to find a PACTOR signal with the code, so the software works.
Yeah, I was quite excited. It wasn't something you really had to have masses of clever hardware or expensive hardware, because a Raspberry Pi 3 is fairly available and quite reasonably priced. So, yeah, I was quite pleased about that. Frank, you got any more to say before I pass it on to the boys?
Well, I think Bill's got a great handle on it, and certainly from the technical end and that sort of thing. My only comment is, as we talked about on this podcast before, in previous episodes, what's going on with all this? Because there's a big hubbub with Ted Rappaport, a submission to the FCC about these issues and some others. And I think it was just general confusion in the ham space over it. We've kind of called for more education. My understanding from ARRL sources was that this was kind of a response from some lobbying efforts to say, look, it's hitting the fan, folks, and we need to do something to clarify. And I think Bill's got a great view on it. I will say that to the extent this is an effort for them to reduce the questions about what does encryption mean? Well, it's not encrypted if we give you a way to listen to it. And the complementary organization, Windlink, is putting forth a database of amateur radio transmissions. That goes a far piece, as we might say here in the South. But I would ask them to not restrict it to just Raspberry Pi, because let's face it, the rank and file ham, I'm going to guess about the UK, you guys can correct me, but the rank and file ham here in the United States might ask you about, I like Pi. Now, what's this Raspberry business? not all of them have Raspberry Pis. Us chiphead types might. So I would like for them to put it out on most of the platforms, and I'd like for them to make it open source. I don't see why not if their whole purpose is to enhance transparency. So I think it's a great step forward.
Yeah, I agree with you, Frank. And I think Raspberry Pi is the start. Well, from what Bill was saying earlier, it's an early thing. It'll move forward, so it'll happen. Ed, have you any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, just in that last point, in the actual introduction to the text, it says the free PMON software runs under the Linux operating system. And then it goes on to say later on that it's available for Raspberry Pi, for the hardware, the suggested hardware. But my understanding is that it will be available for multiple Linux platforms. So maybe not Windows yet, but at least for multiple Linux platforms, not just Raspberry Pi. And the other thing for our non-US listeners who are saying, what the heck's PACTOR, what's Windlink, etc., PACTOR is the protocol behind data transmission on the used most of all, or most useful on the HF bands. I don't think there's any reason you can't use it on VHF, but in any case, Windlink is like an email system that runs over HF RF. And used often in emergency situations.
Yeah, thanks for clearing that one up. Well, us guys in the UK probably, I've never used it. I'm going to find out in a minute. Chris, have you used any of this sort of stuff, or is it sort of...
I've not. I mean, I'm glad that Bill was able to fill us in there, because it's not something I have any experience of. But, my only comment really is it's good that they've now got this in software. You don't have to go and buy a load of hardware to be able to decode it, which makes it kind of accessible. But I also take Frank's point. I think it would be good if it was open source, then people could improve it, and that's kind of the amateur way, isn't it? Really, so people can get involved and contribute.
Yeah, certainly. Martin, we probably haven't left much for you to say, have we?
Well, I don't know. When I first saw PACTOR, I think back to something that I think I had written on the front of an old TNC that I used to have, but I never actually got it to do anything. Great runs on a Pi, great that it's free. I do wonder what kind of interface you need to connect to this. I mean, do you need a TNC, or can you do this like with your inbuilt sound card or your signal link?
I have a USB sound card. Yeah.
Okay.
Mine.
Okay. And the other thing I'd be asking is whether you're using PACTOR 4 or 3, that I think you mentioned there, Bill, and you're limited to like 300 baud rate, whatever. I mean, who's going to know, especially if your signal's encrypted, who's going to know if you're sending? I know you shouldn't, but surely it's just a data signal that goes out. I mean, surely if your call sign goes out in a readable form, then is it not just a data stream? I mean, because in reality, I could transmit a digital mode digital voice mode, and you're not scrambling it as such, are you?
No, you're not. With most of the things I run at the end of the transmission, it sends my call sign in Morse. Yeah.
So your call sign goes out. They know who it is, but I don't understand why we're limited as to what you can do. Because if all you're experimenting, you're just sending data as long as you're within a certain bandwidth. What version you're sending, I don't know. But that's just my thought on it. But I have to ask this.
Currently on HF in the US, we're not limited by bandwidth. We're limited by baud rate, which is almost the same thing.
Which I don't really understand.
Well, that's a holdover from what Frank, 1978?
Something like that. Yeah. Remember, we used to talk about 300 baud modem, and we went to 1200 in quote baud. No, it's 1200 BPS, because suddenly baud code doesn't mean the same thing at that speed. Right. And therein evolves some of the issues as far as the metrics.
Yeah, and the 300 baud modem, it only gets signal so wide so to go through a old phone system.
Okay, yeah.
And they just kind of not directly redid it for radio, but it's the idea that it limits the signal bandwidth that it actually uses by reducing the baud. But modern signal processing and modern compression and the different signalings they do with varicodes and phase shift keying and all this other fancy stuff, and you could go much faster in the same amount of bandwidth and go over that limit, which is the base problem. Because it appears to me, as far as I can tell, everywhere else in the world, it's based on bandwidth, not throughput. Yeah. So as much as you can jam through, and whatever 500, 1,000, 1,800, 2.7, whatever. It's legal everywhere else except here. So it's a holdover.
And Martin, if you take a look at the story and you see some gobbledygook that says it can decode B2F stroke LZHUF, that's Limpel-Zev Huff, 3 people who developed a particular compression algorithm back in the day.
And that's an easy to use compression.
Okay, so let me ask another question. What is actually on PACTOR? You say you hear data coming through. Is this people chatting? Is it just operating like FT8 or FT8 call? Or are we sending
It could be a
files
spreadsheet. It could be an Excel spreadsheet of data of bodies and their names and contact info, and they're dead and they got to be picked up by chopper. It could be that. It could be a lot of things.
So it's like a file transfer protocol.
Right. It could be keyboard to keyboard, but I haven't seen keyboard to keyboard PACTOR in a long time. I'm sure people are doing it. Yeah. If you have any hate mail, send it to Colin, not me.
Whose email address? No, we're kidding.
And he won't be able to share it with us because of the restrictions over in the UK about sharing email. So we won't get it. So just send it all to Colin.
Well, you could always send your complaint in via PACTOR to Colin.
That's true. But the most recent things that I'm aware of that's transmitted over PACTOR is Windlink, which is email, HF email. And the Windlink group put out a U.S. What's the word that they use? U.S. Amateur Radio Message Viewer. So you can go out and see all the messages that are sent over HF, to and from U.S. hams over Windlink, and it's not very many. That's the other thing too. I think people are over exaggerating the issue, because I'm looking here to see how many do they even have for the last month. It's less.
Keep in mind, Martin. Email often has attachments, which and so you get into some complicated. It's a richer mode of using that generically to transfer information that voice just wouldn't do, CW just wouldn't do in your lifetime.
Correct. And when you're helping an emergency management agency over here, that may be exactly what they want to do. They want to send an email to another agency with maybe an attachment for request, whether it's a text attachment or a document, attachment. And it seems to me that this is a viable thing that people are actually using.
It is, and it can be asynchronous as opposed to synchronous. That is, in voice, someone's got to be there to hear it, right? Well, you may send that, and the receiving party may not get it until tomorrow or in an hour or something.
And tailoring onto that comment, that's one of the major concerns, is these things are running automatic. They're automatic stations in a lot of cases. And that makes a lot of people nervous, because there may or may not be an operator sitting at the switch, but lack of a better term.
Gotcha.
The other thing I've heard they use is pre-formatted forms. So, especially in emergency situations, just fill in the boxes and hit the enter key. So, it's an
common
interface. Yeah, and so what the operator sees is a dumb terminal, if you like, a computer terminal. Fill the boxes and press enter. What happens behind the scenes is that gets converted into Windlink standard document data, so that they don't send the actual complete boxes in the form or anything, but they just send a code that says it's form number 123, and here's the data for the fields. And when it comes out the other end, it's reconstituted as the form.
That's really clever.
So it speeds things up. And
here in the U.S.
reduces errors.
Here in the U.S., Homeland Security and the other emergency management agencies actually have a complete system of forms like that. And, so it's part of your training when you take this stuff. learning those forms. And there's an incident command system, ICS, that's the generic term that's evolving. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a whole deal. And if you're ham with a shack on a belt, and that's what your ham life is, you're kind of all up in there on that.
Right. And I just, showed up on the webcam here. I have my nice little handy Department of Homeland Services Incident Command System Field Guide. And these forms are encoded and they're encoded in here. And for Windlink, I'm familiar with them being encoded in the NBEMS, which that's what our local folks use here, the Narrowband Emergency Management System through FLDigi, Message. And things like, things that I frequently, have to do here is like an ICS 205 form, letting them know what frequencies we're using and how we're planning on using them for the incident. ICS 213 is another one I've seen sent around. That's a general message form. ICS 211 check-ins, so you got an idea of who's there. I mean, there's a whole grocery list of forms, and all these systems that are designed to help with emergency services, with your local emergency management agencies or volunteer organizations, they all have their own set of forms. Plus, they have the federal forms on this side of the pond. So it's just another mechanism that's available for sending emergency traffic.
Well, I knew this one was going to go long. And, I think.
Sorry.
No, Bill. Don't be sorry. I think we've covered it well.
Just think, Welton, when you handed it to me, you said, "I don't think you've got much more to say on it." Sorry.
I knew you'd throw the hand grenade.
Hand grenade room.
Yeah.
That was like 11 minutes.
Yeah, something like that. Well, that's good. That's good. Moving on. Can online ham radio exams improve accessibility? Well, it's kind of we're talking about the UK here, and the problem I think we have in the UK is that radio clubs, predominantly it's radio clubs that run courses and do training, and the people do it free, and they have to find either halls like we do, and you've got to find people with time to do these things. Now, there's a suggestion that it's a bit of a problem now because people are travelling long distances, and somewhere in this news story it talks about somebody travelling from Wales to Essex for 200 miles each way. Well, Colin beat him on that because he flew over from Ireland, which is about 400 miles each way. But, hey, just thinking out loud, and I'm going to throw this one on the table, do we need to have national regional centres that do exams on a regular basis and have regular trainers? I know that some of the dealers do training, like Martin Lynch, but do we need to have a regional training areas? Would this solve the problem? Mr. Rothwell, you go first.
I think that'd be a great thing. I mean, it's no secret that I travel quite a long way. I live in southwest London. I travelled for my foundation and my intermediate. I travelled up to Chelmsford in Essex. That was a good hour and a half on a good day each way. And for my advanced exam, or for my advanced course, I travelled to the other side of Reading, which, again, on a good day was about 2 hours each way. And that was based purely and simply on the fact of other clubs in the area were not offering the training at times that I could get to, or in most cases, they were not offering the advanced training at all. So would I have got licensed a lot sooner had there been regional training or regional things available? Absolutely, of course I would have done. We talk about online radio exams. I think if they're policed properly, people doing these things, we talk about perhaps doing it at home, then potentially they could work. But although I'm nervous about it, to me, it's easier to cheat. But as with the whole exam system, I still maintain that the way that we all do it is wrong, because it should be about knowing where to get the answers from and how to apply them, rather than learning it all in the top of your head. Why do I need to know what I know we give them the formulas on this, but we don't tell them what the formula's for during the exam. And it shouldn't be a case of, I need to account for the factor of this and convert that without whatever. It should be a case of, here's your question, here's your thing, go solve it. And then you should be able to go and look it up and find out how to do it, with the exception of basic operation, obviously, of your radio, and safety and interference. They're the things you should know off the top of your head the rest of it, I still maintain you shouldn't have to learn that. You should just be able to go and write, okay, I can go and look up how do I deal with this and how do I apply it to this situation.
Well, there are certain bits in the UK where you do that in the exam, Martin. So, yeah, I hear where you're coming from.
But you don't get the opportunity to pick up your book and you can search through the book and then find, oh, right, okay, yeah, I need to apply this. You just get given, here's a piece of paper with all your formulas on it.
No, what you're talking about is an open book exam, but do the foundation license for certain does have 4 sheets of A4 with a lot of information on there, where some of the questions that are asked are go look it up on these sheets of paper. So,
yeah, I forget about that. Of course, we know where can you operate and things like that. And yeah, absolutely. But there are other things I think that we do have to teach people that I don't think are necessary to teach them necessarily not for them to remember.
Okay, that's your opinion, Mr. Howard.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Howard, Chris, you're teaching a course for me at the moment, and you got the book out. Go for it.
What do I think? So I think that it's 2019. I've done quite a few IT certifications. I'm sure some of the guys on the call as well. Now, the way they work is you go along to a centre, of which there are a number. There's quite a few around the country, both in the UK and other parts of the world. And you pay some money. So you go online, you book the exam, you turn up. This centre does exams for every one of these organisations that's out there: Microsoft, Cisco, VMware, whoever it is. And you take the online exam, and then afterwards you get find out straight away if you passed or failed, and they print out a certificate, and then that goes back to the organisation that arranged it. So whether that's whichever company that's kind of sponsors that particular exam, and then you get your kind of official result through later. Now that's an option. Now I suspect there's some cost there. It's very much in the UK, at least, and I'm sure it's the same in the States. It's very much a kind of a club way of doing things. So obviously we're doing this as a club at the moment. We're doing a course, and we're doing it very cheaply. It costs £60 to do both. Back including the exam fee to do the course and the exam. With us, this is a 2-day course plus the exam, so kind of 3 days really. I think the thing you can't do with that model is the practicals. Now, I think for me, probably the most important practicals there are the HF and the VHF contact, actually getting on the air and operating a radio. The other practicals I think are interesting, but I don't think they're absolutely essential, certainly in the foundation anyway. So if you could maybe have if you're being innovative, could you create some kind of online course that had maybe a simulated QSO, maybe, or something along those lines? If you want to make this simple, if you wanted to make this so that it's repeatable and scalable, the problem with clubs is, we as a club, we run a course probably once a year, and that means, I think, and this is what the article was saying, is that people miss out and struggle to get on courses, and that's having an impact on people joining our hobby. Is there a way we can streamline it? Is there a way we can do it online? There's a lot of technology now available. You can now take exams at home via the internet, and someone will watch you take the exam. They'll record your session, they'll record your webcam and microphone and things to check that you're not cheating. I know Martin earlier was saying maybe you can still cheat. Don't know, but I know there are other industries where that's done, and maybe we could follow suit. I think the way we do it in the UK is quite a bit different to the US. In the US, there are no practicals. And you and I, Martin, have both taken the US exam, and it's a lot more of a relaxed experience. You haven't got to book it online, book it beforehand. You're all taking a different test, so you can sit next to each other. It's a much more relaxed atmosphere. If you fail, you can just take it again if you wanted to there and then. You can take one exam, then try the next. You can take you can walk in, take your technician exam, and then if you pass, you get the opportunity to take your general. If you pass that, you get the opportunity to take the extra. So you can walk in, a bit like you, Martin, with nothing and walk out having passed your extra exam. Now, that's not something you can do easily in the UK unless you've done all the practicals for the foundation and intermediate already. So I think there are things we could do. I think it's a little bit radical what's being proposed, but I think we need something radical. I think we are in a hobby where we are losing people. I think the hobby is in decline. And I think we need to find ways that are innovative that can be used to to help to counter that, and I think this is one of them. So I kind of agree. I think, but ideally, we don't want to lose the practicals. I think that's the sticking point: is how would you do practical assessments? Well, you can't do that online, but is there another way of doing it? Could we have? I know, for example, I did my advanced exam through distance learning, and that was all online. That was there were people involved in that at either ends, but that was done. And of course, I had to go and do the exam in person. But if you could move the whole thing to an online platform, I know it's radical and it's probably not going to be popular with everybody, but is that going to mean we get more people in the hobby in the long term? That's the question.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I still come back to to get everything done on practicals, you probably need regional training centres. And we've tried this in London or in South London to get half a dozen clubs together and become like a training group. And it's raised its head a couple of times, but unfortunately...
Yeah, I think the problem. I think the problem is cost. I think if you had a proper regional training centre that had the equipment, had a room, and often actually training courses are run in a place where you might hire a room. So, but hiring a room, we're lucky we use a scout hall and we get that very, very cheaply. If we were to hire a proper room in, say, a conference centre or a hotel, the day rates for that are quite expensive. And I think if you were to do that, you'd have to end up with professional trainers that would need to be paid a wage. You would have to pay for the accommodation for the room, and that would suddenly get very expensive. And maybe that's the reason why that's not happened so far.
But to some extent as well. I mean, this where the dealers and things like this need to step up. I know we mentioned that Martin Lynch does this, but if you think about where the amateur radio dealers are, across the UK, they are more or less evenly spread around the UK. Is it not in their interest to help people out there? I'm sure lots of them have got relatively big premises that they could loan out for. They're not going to get hundreds of people through every day, are they? Even if it's just a group of 5 or 6, surely they could.
It's a fair suggestion. I know that Martin Lynch pretty much designed, when he moved to his new premises, pretty much specified he wanted that accommodation in the building. So whether the others have it, I don't know, but certainly they have a nice training room there where they've got the facilities to train in.
It's an obvious no-brainer and a trip through the gift shop on your way out, sir.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask Ed, because Ed, you did the RAE like I did, and I would guess you went off to night school like I did, because when we did it, we went straight to full licence, and it was something like about a 26, well, it wasn't 26 weeks, but about a 20-week course, wasn't it, or something, Ed?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember how long, 3-4 months anyway. And I did it at my local radio club. So once a week, every week. But coming back to what's been said, I just want to echo what Chris has said. Technically, the capabilities of running both online training and online examinations, excluding at the moment the practical side, already exists for business. So technically it's doable. Whether that's going to be too expensive to employ them to do that is a good question. It might be too expensive, but it's certainly technically possible. And the latest thing we've been hearing about in the last week, even in amateur radio, is augmented reality, and that could be what we could use for online practical tests. So the technology is going to be there if we want to take the leap in that direction. But the danger is it's going to be expensive to do it that way. So is that going to actually reduce the number of people entering the hobby, not increase it? But these businesses that do the training, you can start your training course then at any time, and you can take the exam basically at any time. You're not set to a certain time. And they have regional centres all around every major country. So, that's a possibility, but what would the cost be? I'd like to pull up one point, though, as well, that Trevor M5AKA, who has made this statement that I strongly object to, and the reasoning behind his comments here, he says, the short answer is that you have to be prepared to travel if you want to get started in amateur radio. By that he's saying to go to a course or to go to an exam, etc. he is coming back with the same error that I hear time and time again, which is amateur radio starts with the exam. That's wrong. That's purely wrong. Amateur radio does not just involve taking the exam. Amateur radio could be building kits, it could be shortwave listening, it could be taking part in club activities, log keeping for somebody, camping out, all the other things around the hobby, not just the ones for transmitting. And I would say that the ideal approach I see, just maybe basically because it's what I know, would be to get involved with the radio club first, your local radio club, and see whether you like the hobby, and then move on to get the license, and that's then a stepping stone in the hobby. And if you stay there and never take the license, you're still part of the amateur radio hobby. Anyway, that's my lecture for this week. Who wants to shoot that down?
Yeah, not me. I hear what you guys say, and I had my ear bent by another member of my local club saying, people don't start off shortwave listening anymore. They want to go straight to transmitting. So that's another argument. But I'm aware.
Yeah, but Martin, people start off building things. Think of the hacker communities. Oh, yeah. So there's all that side of things. So yeah, shortwave listening is one of the things, but being a part of the community is more important than getting the license. You've got to be part of the community first. Otherwise, you don't get the support. You don't understand what you do after the license.
True, and you don't get the enjoyment.
Well, I completely agree with Chris. Beautifully stated, actually, if people were listening to Chris, because he's absolutely right on just about every one of his points. On our side of the pond with Frank and I, we have a known, published, multiple guest pool. This is like screaming online testing. It is like, oh my God, why aren't we doing this on this side of the pond? The exact same reasons. I mean, we have high stakes testing now where people watch the webcams. We do it here at work. They go take their final exam for a course. They sit down, webcam, headset, recorder, and they take the exam on the computer and they do their thing. And someone's actually watching them and proctoring them. And it just costs a few dollars for that proctoring session. But it's just the idea that I don't think one size is going to fit every situation. And that's why you want to give people options. I guarantee there are going to be people that are going to learn so much better by showing up to your club, taking the course, taking the exam, listening to Chris. I also guarantee that there are people who are meeting other hams out in maybe they don't have a big club. Maybe they have a real small club. Maybe they don't have a club. Maybe it's just 2 or 3 folks together and they're teaching somebody this stuff. Maybe an online exam would be the way to go for them. But with your current need and requirement for the practical assessment, it makes that part of doing the online assessment incredibly difficult to do. Chris mentioned it briefly. I mean, I actually had in multiple exams I had to take online. They had a virtual router. You had to, make virtual cables, like you're physically plugging stuff in, making the config changes. I got my hands going here. Everyone's laughing at me. Anyway, so the technology is there, but I'm not sure if that would truly encompass the same goal as having somebody sit there and wire up a circuit, check the voltage at different points through the circuit to show how things change as it goes through the different components. So the practical assessments, I think, is a trickier component. On our side of the pond, it'd be straightforward, brain dead. Load the question pools into the course management system, click generate random test, and you're ready to go. Right, Frank?
Well, I agree with 95 or more percent of that. I'm doubly in agreement with Ed that, and I respect Trevor, and he has an opinion, and maybe it was a slip of the word. I'm certainly guilty of that. But getting started is where Ed and I differ with his comments about that. I was involved for 50 years without being licensed, but I dare anyone say I was not involved. I just couldn't transmit. Except for that one time in CB radio, but that's another story. I agree with Bill that it's set and ready. Now we've gone away from this in the States, and I'll make this brief. If hams of a certain age in the States love to tell you how they drove or were carried as a child to the regional FCC office months, and what a drama that was. And you young whippersnappers just don't know what it was like, because we now have volunteer examiner groups that are mostly, not always, affiliated with clubs. And you take one and you're proctored and you're watched. And I did that over in Atlanta and that kind of thing. So the only thing I would try to add to this is the concept of pluralism. Not all hams and potential hams are alike. They come in different sizes. And so there will be different strokes for different folks, to paraphrase Bill's comment. One size is not going to fit them all.
Yeah, I agree with you, Frank. I agree with you that there's no easy solution to this. And I suppose Chris and I understand a little bit more and have some strong ideas on this, because not only have we taken your exams your side of the pond, although we did it in the UK, we also have done the UK various exams and taught them. So it is strange. There's lots of different things, and it will improve, I'm sure. But as you say, there won't be one size fits all. Okay, so moving on to our next news story. In the UK, it's going to be YOTA Month in December, and it's happened a couple of years. But the idea is that you can add a suffix of YOTA to your call sign, and they really want young people under the age of about 25, 26 to get involved and operate. Now, it's a whole month, so groups and clubs and groups can do this and apply for this. But I think it's a good thing. Martin, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, well, to me, this sort of thing's always good. More people on the air, more people to work, special call signs. People go in for this stuff, especially if they get like QSL cards and things for it. We've said before, youth are the future of amateur radio. But one thing that I will say to everybody, if you hear someone out there calling, especially a young person calling for YOTA, even if normally phone SSB is not your thing, even if you're just a hardcore CW operator, you're into contesting or you're into FT8, whatever, if you hear someone call, just go back, answer their call, say hello, even if it's just exchange pleasantries. There's going to be a young kid there who, may not be licensed. They may be taking part as part of a scout thing or, a school or whatever. The chances are you could absolutely make their day and encourage them to get into radio. Go say hi.
Yeah, agree with you, Martin. We need to keep new members of the hobby interested, and that works also for the call signs. I would rather work a foundation license holder first. I would always work the foundation license holder first before I work a full license holder.
The guy who's trying really hard with his 10 watts over the guy that's running a kilowatt up the road.
Yeah, that too. But yeah. Equally, in fairness, they're the guys that need the excitement.
Definitely.
The full license holder can wait 5 minutes before I work them, and it's not I don't want to work a full license holder, but I think we ought to encourage new licensees into the hobby, and certainly in the UK, M6, M7.
I'm guilty of working the M7s ahead of the M6s now.
Yeah, well that's fine, because the M6s have been around a while, so they've had experience. Chris, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think it's great that we've got this program every year now, which is promoting the hobby to the youngsters, and I think I think that's a great thing. It hopefully will bring more people into the hobby. It'll bring more young people into the hobby as well. Noting that I think the maximum age people taking part is 25, and obviously people must do this because every year it's pretty successful. So no, I think it's a great idea. I think it's a good way. It's a good incentive for clubs to reach out to young people to help them to take part. So, no, I think it's a great thing. And like Martin Rothwell was saying, I think we should make the effort to get on the air and work some of these stations.
Yeah, good news. Well, Frank, it don't happen your side of the pond, but I was hoping one day that you say your side of the pond would get a YOTA event going.
Well, it's something that we should, and I certainly applaud this. And to the extent that international stations can give a listen and they have time to focus on this, I think, as Martin was saying, and hey, give them a lift. Trying to work them. I mean, if something in the UK is exciting, something from abroad, whether it's just across the channel in France or wherever, it'll be even more exciting. And I think the more we can look out for this, the better off we'll be collectively.
Agree 100%. And Ed, I know you're in the same ITU region as us, so you'll also be having YOTA stations, I would guess, on all people wanting to work the YOTA stations.
Well, I was about to come in and correct you when I got a chance, because this isn't just a UK December YOTA month.
You're correct.
It is actually, no, it wasn't you, it was Martin Butler that said to start with that it's UK. The UK has the GB19 YOTA call sign that the RSGB is sharing out during December, but there are other YOTA call signs in other IARU Region 1 countries. Even, an IARU Region 1 is Europe and Africa and Middle East. So South Africa often has a lot of stations on, for example. I don't know if there's a German one on this year. There has been in previous years. And the Eastern European countries often also take part. So it's a great thing on the air, but it's also a thing where clubs are asked to put on special events where they publicise to the younger people as well. And, it's as we've all said, it's all a good thing. It's been going a while. And there is a YOTA in Region 2 for the Americas now. It's been started by... I'm trying to remember his name. Stephen somebody, I'm sorry. We interviewed him at Dayton, even at Xenia, about the YOTA Region 2. And that is actually forming shape. Neil from Ham Talk Live and AR Newsline is also one of the people behind that.
Very good.
And it covers similar things. They're trying to organise similar things to YOTA in Region 1 now for the Americas. So it is spreading, is this idea, which is good. And I still can't remember. Coffee was his old name, but his new name's something else. Stephen Mann, used to be Stephen Coffee, is one of the lead people on that as well in the US. Sterling. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Yep. Sterling Mann. And yeah, so there's things happening both sides of the pond. It's a great idea. Why not have it December with the good Christmas feelings as well around the place? And I'll just echo what everybody else has said. If you hear somebody on, if they're a YOTA station, or even if it's just, it sounds like it's a youngster, take the time to go back and give them a contact. It costs you nothing. And as the other guys are saying, it's worth $1 million to these kids or young people, because they're just getting into the hobby.
Now, you heard it here on the ICQ podcast first. What he's saying is, if you hear something, say something.
Yeah, I agree with you. And go back, as Ed has just said, go back to new license holders. They're still trying to get the excitement. And if they call and nobody ever goes back to them, it's a surefire way of them leaving our hobby. So, let's encourage new people and the youth. Moving on, inspiring youth with science in space. And in fairness, we're looking at this. NASA have had the International Space Station up there and done contacts for a long time. So I kind of think it's good to mention what they've been up to. Frank, do you want to go first?
Sure. One of the things I'm very impressed with NASA about, and I've actually worked for NASA, the Stennis Space Center here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and they have had a dramatic outreach effort here as government agencies go. And there's been a decided effort to include women. And you might know that recently we had the first ever all-female spacewalk here, I think last week. And so it's not just for women, of course, but there's a real outreach to include women here. And just the notion that you can talk live with an astronaut, ask them questions, however mundane or complex they may be. If that doesn't get you excited, regardless of your age, I'm not sure in radio what would. So good on them. I think it's a great program.
Certainly is, certainly is. Ed, do you want to go next?
Yeah, this article we've got here is actually just an overview of how the ARRL program works and how it works on a particular day, where there's about 10 minutes of communication time available, connecting up from a school usually to the space station using amateur radio to do that. And I think a lot of people listening to this will go, yeah, we know all this. But just it's good to remember good things in the hobby and the help that, in this case, NASA and Roscosmos, when it's the Russian side of things, and the UK and the Australians, etc., that take part in this, and it always forms part of a larger program. So for months before the contact from the school, the children are learning about space, they're learning about electronics, they're learning about technology, they're learning about radio, and it's the pinnacle of that time that they spend learning, is that they either get to watch one of their friends talk to a space to an astronaut or cosmonaut, or that they themselves talk to them, and it's going to be a memory that's going to be with these young children. They tend to be, less than 15 quite often, and so it's going to be a memory that's going to be with them all their lives. And yeah, it's possibly one thing that will push them into a technology career. And we need technicians. It's all right being able to program a computer, but you've got to be able to fix the physical wheels on the car that are going to fall off it. The computer's not going to do that for you. So, it's good to get technology out there, and this is also a good opportunity for press for the school and for amateur radio at the same time. So, all in all, I don't know how long the ARRL program's been going. It's obviously been going as long as the space station, and then before that there was the space shuttle program and also the MIA. So amateur radio and NASA together have been, and Roscosmos together have been doing this for many years. And well done on what they've done, and good luck for the future.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. Let's say it's a lot of good work. Mine, would you like to have a comment on this one?
Well, inspiring the youth. We're talking to the space station. I like it. I know that previously there was a guy on the space station, Doug Wheelock. I think he really enjoyed the amateur radio stuff up there. And when he came back down to Earth, I think the space station, the contacts and stuff did die out a little bit. But I've listened to it go over a few times with pre-scheduled chats to schools. Obviously, you only hear one side of it. I've heard it a few times outside of there, but not in the English language. And I've never spoken to them, but I know that I've had other people listening before, and I've had just a handheld with an extended antenna on it. I've had people standing beside me. I'm like, what's that you're listening to? And then they realise that what I'm listening to is coming from a space station that is flying overhead, and you see the look on their face. And these are like grown adults, like, oh my God, you're actually listening to that. And they sort of see me with like aerials on my car or aerials in my house and think he's just a bit of a geek. He's just messing around, And they sort of just like pat him on the head and, just leave him to his toys. And then they hear something like that and you think, actually, there's more to this than just someone playing. Maybe I need to take sort of what he does a little bit more seriously in amateur radio. So I think this sort of stuff is great because, again, it's another way of getting, in this case, youngsters into the hobby. So brilliant.
Yeah, well, it wasn't a youngster, but I remember a few years back in Cyprus, I was in the car park about 9:30 at night local time, and we were waiting for the International Space Station to go over. I had Mrs. B with me, and we were waiting for the International Space Station to go over to watch it. And some woman came up to say, "What are you doing?" And I said, "We're waiting for the International Space Station to go over." And she said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, I'll be out here in a minute." And she stood and watched it go over. And it was about 5-6 minutes, so I think it was visible for.
Yeah.
And then I rush inside and tell my family, now they can come out and watch it. I said, "No, you ain't going to see it again tonight." It was like, but it was interesting. But Chris, I know you've listened to the International Space Station going over, and you've watched a lot of the videos and downloaded all sorts of things from it, haven't you?
Well, yeah, certainly. I've picked up SSTV from it. They've done that quite a few times, which is always. You still get a little excitement, even if you've done it before. Knowing that this thing is up there, travelling at 17,000 or so miles an hour, you can see it crossing the sky. There's a big bright spot in the sky crossing the dark sky. It's something special about that, and I think it's something that captures people's imaginations. Like Martin was saying, even adults, it's pretty. It's quite. I was actually in the pub a couple of years ago, and my mate and I were looking up. I knew it was coming over. I get an email alert telling me when it's about to come over. So I was sort of in the pub garden looking up. There's a few people around us, and they thought we were absolutely bombed. What are these guys doing? And one of them asked us, and I goes, "Oh, well, we're waiting for the International Space Station." And they go, "No, you're not, are you?" And anyway, it came over, and he's looking at it, and the guy was absolutely couldn't believe that's what it was. He was just, what really? And he goes, "Yeah, that's what, you can see it from here. It's a tiny thing, yeah, that's it there." And clearly it was. But yeah, I've also a number of times heard these scheduled contacts with schools, and I think it's a great way of capturing the imagination of children. I think it's a great example of amateur radio in action, isn't it? I think it's a great way to get people really engaged in what we do. I think it's kind of the pinnacle, isn't it? If you can work the International Space Station, that's kind of really. If you manage to do it personally, I think that's got to be quite a magic moment for any amateur, even if you've been doing the hobby for many years, in my opinion, anyway. So yeah, I think it's a great way of getting people involved and really engaging people and capturing. When you say to people ask you about your hobby, the amateur radio, oh really, you're a bit of a geek, and then you say, you can talk to the space station, really? Didn't know you could do that. And then you show them a little video, like we showed them on what previously, I think one of our club nights, we showed the video of one of the astronauts talking, I think as it was coming over the States, and it's still something special there. I think the only concern was, I think it was mentioned at the RSGB convention that they think the ISS at some point will be closing down potentially, which will be a real shame, because that's one of our real sort of selling points, I think.
Yeah, it is, and it's not got much of a life left, or its life cycle.
If the funding, if it works out, things might change. But I think that's the current funding plan, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
But the next thing, of course, is the staging post that's going to be orbiting around the moon for the people on the way to Mars, which will also have amateur radio on it.
Now, that would be cool. Yeah.
I would have been surprised if amateur radio wasn't on board, in fairness. But yeah, it's good. Well, just looking at, give you some facts and figures, when the International Space Station goes over, the schools usually manage to get an average of about 18 questions asked and replied to. And normally they only get about a 10-minute window to ask those 18 questions. So it is fairly quick. But it's good that the children are able to do that. And it is great fun. And I've listened to it as well, going over a few times. Moving on to our next news story, Michigan State University Amateur Radio Club celebrates its centennial. So that's really good. 100 years. I mean, that's got to be a real good one, hasn't it, Frank?
I think so. Reaching a century mark is something that has been done by a few clubs. I can think of the club in Atlanta at Georgia Tech. Reached a century mark 6 or 7 years ago at some point, but it's sort of a rare thing. In conversation with ARRL CEO Howard Mickel in one of our feature interviews, we talked a little bit about what they're going to do to kind of engage the college clubs. And I pointed out to him that some of my dabbling in looking at the early initial experimental licenses in the United States, many of them were held by universities. So in principle, it kind of goes back to universities had some role, and therefore what became college clubs, into sparking, pun intended, amateur radio in the country. So good on Michigan State. My wife is an alum. She got her master's degree there. And I think it's a great thing to, for them to recognize and brag about. I took the liberty on behalf of the podcast of posting on their Facebook page to let them know they would be featured in this episode of the ICQ podcast. So hopefully we'll get some more green and white listeners. Green and white are the colors of their athletic team. So
Well, they would have been, green and white's a great colour, Frank, but in fairness, orange and white would have been better.
I agree. Maybe when Clemson has their century thing, we can do a co-sponsorship with them since they're orange and white colors.
Yeah, I'm only jesting, but yeah, no problems at all. Martin, your thoughts on this one?
Well, 100 years in as running in 100 years, fantastic celebration. We say here's to another 100, but I do wonder, 100 years time, what's the technology going to be like? They're going to be looking back at all the latest stuff we've got now. It's like, toys. Remember that? That was rubbish, wasn't it?
It'll be FT8 intergalactic mode, Martin.
Whatever it is, they'll look back at what you can look at our state of the art kit we had now, and in 100 years time, that do you remember when when Fusion just came out, or do you remember when Icon brought out that 7800 or whatever it is? That was rubbish, wasn't it? And I'm not saying it's rubbish, but in 100 years time, I'm sure
they might say like it's a classic. You got it. It's one in our museum. Potentially.
Oh, look at this retro piece of kit. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. They don't make up what they used to.
Yeah, software defined radio. Do you remember those?
Yeah. Well, you'd laugh about it, but Chris and I went to the RSGB convention last week, and we sat in on a couple of lectures. And in fairness, there's a lot happening in radio or wireless technology that is completely changing things. And our main staple, the super het receiver that's been the main staple of design for the last 100 years, is slowly disappearing because it's all going to be done in software. And it won't be long before even little QRP rigs will be SDR because you just buy the chip.
Well, as we know, ICO have already announced, haven't they? The IC705.
Yeah. So...
But hang on though, the best SDR receivers or transceivers you can get at the moment have got a super het front end on them.
True. I believe that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think both Yaesu, Kenwood, and Icon, the top of the range, and Ellicraft. Yeah, the top of the range models.
Yeah.
I don't think Kenwood is yet, but certainly Ellicraft, Yaesu, and Icon certainly.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. The hobby is moving on phenomenally, which is great news, guys. And as I say, I think you all agree with me because you pretty much said it just now. It's the hobby's moving on. It's really great. Congratulations to Michigan State University for achieving 100 years in the hobby. So really great.
And we'll raise a glass of our favourite drink for the next 100.
Yeah. Coffee or beer used to be mine, but not today.
Cider. You know what happens when we've had too many apple juices though, Martin?
Not you and me, but we won't go any further than that. Okay.
I was going to be naughty then. No, I won't.
No, you don't be naughty. Now, the last news story, Frank, you raised this. New ways of communicating with the ARRL, was it? You enhanced and improved communications between the ARRL leadership and its staff. So I'll let you give us a clue on that.
Well, the conventional way of communicating with the ARRL is to talk to your local section manager, usually a state, but in big states, they're split up. And kind of the old tried and true method of buttonholing and what you like, what you don't like, what needs to be done, what shouldn't be done, etc. And like many other groups have found, that's fine and that's good and should happen. But really a direct way of communicating to the league office was tried with the Logbook of the World experiment a few years ago, which began with some in-house IT and quickly grew. And now it's had over 1 billion QSOs registered in Logbook of the World. And they say that they have improved on that largely because of rank and file input, where they had a Google Groups online group where LOTW was the focus. Now, they have added 3 more groups, one on contesting. If you want to get fur flying, you get in a room of contesters here in the States and suggest they change the scoring method, or should Kosovo be a DX entity or not, or what have you. So they've got one on contesting where everybody who wants to, and you don't have to be an ARRL member. This is not members only. So one on contesting, one on awards, and a third on IARU. And former CEO or Chief Operating Officer, I guess his title was, Dave Sumner, K1ZZ, who is our IARU secretary, is moderating that one. So that gives 4 groups where, member or not, you can join, and you can parlay that membership into giving them your fill of what should go on. So I think people ought to take advantage of that and have their input.
Yeah, well, it sounds good, and it sounds like things are moving forward with new technology, which is good. So,
Yeah.
I'm always pleased to see when people are trying something new. Chris, you've been left to last many times. What do you think?
Well, I think that some other national societies could follow suit. I think let's be honest here. I think the RSGB have been a little bit slow with the social media. I think they've finally caught up. I think they were quite a while where they hadn't kind of figured out Facebook or Twitter. I think they have now, and I think the ARRL think are doing the right thing. I don't think there's really an easy way to. I mean, I think certainly in the UK we follow that similar structure to the US. We have that kind of hierarchical structure where you talk to your regional representative or your deputy regional representative for the area that you're in the UK. And it kind of feeds up the chain, and having that, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a good way to structure things, to balance the load a little bit. But there are some things where actually, perhaps through technology, you can have that direct conversation. So I think they could. I think we should watch with interest over here and see how well that works, and see if it's something that we can do in the UK as well. I'm sure it's not too difficult to do with technology. There's plenty of brains out there that can do this sort of thing.
Yeah, well, the last episode, I was really impressed with some of the software that the RSGB are using for propagation, and I was also very impressed with Simone showing me how they validate contests and the software they use for that. So there are a lot of automations in place, which is very, very interesting at the moment. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Okay, well, just to say, first of all, this is not new technology at all. It's been around for years. It's what we used to call, or still call, listservs or reflectors. Good that it's ARRL running their own, as opposed to the other ones that are out there already discussing exactly these, well, certainly the contesting side of things. There's several listservs around where people discuss that in the contesting community. So, I mean, the key point here is it's the ARRL running them and moderating, and so effectively controlling them for input back to the ARRL. Discussion groups on all these subjects are around already, and people are already using them. The point here is you're getting a way of giving those comments back into the ARRL when it's relevant to them. I believe WIA also does this already. If you tell me the RSGB doesn't, that surprises me, because it's not, technically, it's a very easy thing to set up. So, but good luck to them, because they're standing up and saying, okay, you can talk to us, rather than us sitting in a castle where you can't get to us. So it'd just be interesting to see how hard they moderate, because sometimes you get people on these lists that you don't want on these lists. So that can always be a problem. Good luck to them. And, all the more that people can talk to their national society, the better.
Yeah, I agree. We have to communicate. Martin, what's your last words?
I don't have very much more to add on this. I mean, it's a great, embracing the technology of today. If it's another way of communicating with them, great. We talk about, is this something that the likes of the RSGB and things could embrace? Of course, but we all know that a number of us have got, friends with, people within the RSGB on our Facebook, they're already using the technology. It can't be that much difficult to add it into their existing system. But I think it's just a case of, there's always going to be one person somewhere, and not just necessarily the RSGB, but any organisation that's going to say, oh, he's getting nervous and going to push back. We know that from our own club, and we try to embrace social media and aspects like that, don't we? So what's the interest, I think?
Yeah, I sort of see with the RSGB in the UK, there's an RSGB Facebook group, but that's pretty much for members to discuss things amongst themselves rather than to communicate with the RSGB. And there's not like an official RSGB social media person, I don't think, monitoring that. They might be, but I don't think there's like a way of asking them questions or having a direct interface with them. I think it's more about a way of members to communicate between themselves.
Although, just out of interest, one thing that I did notice, the Ofcom, of course, our UK radio regulator, they're on Twitter, and they're tweeting quite a lot about what they're doing. And they tweeted a picture the other day of a drone that they use. And I just replied to it and said, hey, what do you use that for? And they actually replied in quite a bit of detail about how the thing worked, what they use it for, and things like that. So, other organisations are starting to use it. So Ofcom are doing it. So, why not?
And actually, maybe on Twitter, because I know they're on Twitter as well, the RSU, maybe they do respond. I don't know. I do follow them. I haven't ever tried to talk to them specifically on Twitter. So, but certainly on Facebook, it seems to be, like I say, a group, a way for people to communicate between themselves rather than specifically to the RSGB. Twitter might be different. Not sure.
I think more people are using Twitter nowadays. I think Facebook is less of a thing as it was.
Maybe.
Yeah. Well, Chris, what have you been up to?
What have we been up to? What have we been up to? Well, as you mentioned, we've been to the RSGB convention, and we had an interesting conversation with a bunch of people that was recorded. So that'll be coming out soon. I won't spoil what it's about, but hopefully that'll be of interest to our listeners. I think there'll be a video and an audio for that, won't there? I think a recording of that.
Yeah.
So that was quite good. I think I've been on the podcast since we've been back from the Hamfest, so I think we've already covered that one. That was a few weeks ago now. More recently, we've had a couple of club I've had a club meeting. We had a talk about HMS Belfast last week, which is great. And then, of course, the most recent thing we've been doing is running a foundation training course. We've got 6 candidates. They all seem pretty good, actually. I think I'm not really concerned about any of them. We normally have 1 or 2 where we say, well, that person might not quite make it, but I think this occasion, all 6 of them seem to be keeping up. I guess we only really find out on the morning of the exam when we go through the revision session, but they all seem to be fairly sensible and seem to be keeping up. So I'm hopefully it's going to be good. But it's funny, every time we do a foundation course, in my mind, I always think, this is really easy. It's foundation. Done this lots of times before. When you actually do a training course, it's 2 pretty full days. And you do actually teach a heck of a lot of material. I mean, if it's someone that's not ever done radio before, or electronics before, or anything to do with their hobby, it's amazing just how much information you have to absorb in not a lot of time. So people that there think this is really easy, believe me, it's not. Especially someone that's never done it before.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chris. I mean, I come away Sunday night after doing 2 days, and you did a lot more sessions than me this time. But I actually come away quite tired, thinking, I've been busy. So it is quite tiring, as I say, if you're a student, because you really are getting your head.
Okay, so what have I been doing? I've been busy with SOTA again. So there was a big event a weekend ago, last Saturday, which was the biannual Summit to Summit, Europe to Australasia and Japan QSO party, if you like, starting at about 7 a.m. in the morning local time. Band conditions are absolutely horrible, but what I did have with me, I actually managed to get finished in time building a portable amplifier, so I could run about 50 watts instead of the usual 20, or a bit more than 50, actually, probably 60 or 70. 40 meters, ram jam full of stations, worked 27 stations altogether. 5 of those were other mountains, other summits, but all around Europe. And also in that group, though, I also was called by 2 Jamboree on the Air stations, which I thought was quite nice. I had a chat Unfortunately, there were no Cubs or Scouts waiting to talk on the radio. It was just the amateur operator there. But it's nice to talk to the YOTA stations as well, because their event was on at the same time as ours. And I've got another one coming up on the 2nd of November, which is, again, a summit-to-summit QSO party, this time between Europe and North America. Well, actually, the Americas, North and South America. So looking forward to that. That'll be out in an afternoon, hopefully in the warmth as opposed to the cold of the last one. So, yeah, it's been SOTA and constructing things for SOTA. And, slowly but surely getting things the way I want them.
Well, that sounds good. That sounds good. And so sounds like a lot of you been up to all sorts of things. But I know, Frank, you've been busy as well, haven't you?
Yes, and you have been part of that, Martin. Of course, rolling out our Homebrew Hero Award for 2019, Hans Summers, G0 UPL. We were delighted to have that recommendation from our selection committee, and he's just floored by it all, I think. And Martin, you did an exceptionally good interview with him, and we're glad to get that out and in the media. And we'll continue to follow what he's doing, particularly with some of the prizes that have been donated, him using things that on his bench. And during the year, we'll kind of cover a little bit of that on the Homebrew Heroes website. So that's part of it. And then not so highbrow, been digging a small trench and running conduits out of my workbench area from my garage through a brick wall to do two things. One, to give a drain pipe for a dehumidifier, so my test equipment can remain about 50% humidity. And the other is to run some lines to a magnolia tree. And gosh, officially I can't say, but what could I run lines to a magnolia tree for? You know, there could be a GPS antenna hidden in the crown of that tree. That's a possibility. There could be one of these new active loop antennas that are just running on wire as opposed to a hula hoop type thing. There could be something like that. And they could be a Pardo, PAR0T antenna there. Those might be three things I could use wire to in a conduit up to a magnolia tree, but one will never know for sure. Those would come in good for frequency measurement and some other things on my workbench. I did save a few coppers and added a desired possession. I bought and took delivery of a new spectrum analyzer with a built-in tracking generator from Siglent. And after looking at Dave Jones in Australia's EEV blog teardown of that versus the comparable Regal model, decided to go with Siglent and have a lot of confidence in Dave Jones' assessment of things. So I got that in my workbench, kind of move a few things around and that sort of thing. Was in the right room on the wrong evening and got elected vice president for programming for my local club. I will not ask you guys across the pond to stay up past midnight to appear on Skype and give a talk to the club. Although if you get, insomnia, I will take offers for that. And finally, I'm sad to report that one of our fellow podcasts has fallen on hard times. The QSO Today podcast with Eric Guth, 4Z1UG, ran out of good guests, and he had to resort to inviting me to be one of his guests. And so I hope he can recover from that in the near future. So I was very humbled to be on the QSO Today podcast. So kind of running out of steam with that, guys.
Yeah, I spotted your interview on that, Frank. It was very interesting. And yeah, the Homebrew Heroes is good. That's out there. I very much enjoyed talking to Hans. In fairness, I was actually nattering to Hans for well over an hour. I've known Hans about 15 years. And you guys heard the 15 minutes which I recorded as the feature. But in fairness, Hans and I were talking about all sorts of things and reminiscing and one thing and another. So it was great to catch up with him, and great guy. Go on, Bill. What have you done? What have you done in radio since the last time we spoke to you?
Quite a bit, because I went on vacation for the last recording, so I missed it. Went to the beach for a couple days. Took the KX3 with me, so just listened. Didn't really do much while I was down there. But the other weekend, I worked the Pennsylvania QSO party from the house. that was exciting. I ended up working 143 stations. I got 62 of the counties out of 67. Looks like I was did the contest for like 5.5 hours, so I actually got a really good run there. But something funny happened during the QSO party. It's like on my way to something else, I had something else happen. I worked some of the 100 watts on a wire stations for their Fallout event. So because I worked a couple of the stations for the 100 watts on wire Fallout, I turned in my scores and I randomly won a prize. Specifically, PowerFilm Solar foldable solar panels on its way.
Good deal.
Yeah, that's exciting. So thank you, Christian, and the 100 Watts on Wires crew. Keep your eyes open for the next 100 Watts on Wire activity days. You too can be a winner. Just make sure you send in your scores so that they can randomly select people. And I had a rant, which I'm going to skip, which was talking about the Solar Flux Index. The other morning, it was 64 as read in Canada. That's the 10.7 centimeter radial flux. 64 is lower than I thought it could go. So that's another conversation for another day. So we were getting to the solar minimum.
Yeah. Well, they talked about the solar minimum coming fairly soon, and it was sort of mentioned when we were up at the RSGB convention a couple of times. So yeah, it is getting close. So what have I been up to? Well, one morning a few days ago, I came down. I was on late shift, and I came down about 7:15, 7:45 in the morning local time, only to walk into the front room and hear my call sign being called. Yeah, there's somebody calling me on the radio, and I looked round and I couldn't find a radio on, and I thought, wonder what that is. And then suddenly realised that I had Zello running on my phone. And I ended up working Tom, VK3FTOM, a foundation licence holder in Australia. And Tom's at school, or he's in college. And we had a long chat for probably about 45 minutes. And he does send on his regards to all of you for all the podcasts you do, and he really enjoys it. And he's found it very helpful. So, Tom, I did say to you, the other boys will always talk to you if we hear you. And I did say to you, if you don't get a reply, it's because we haven't heard you call, not we're ignoring you. So bear that one in mind. Chris and Martin and I and the rest of the guys have been extremely busy this side of the pond. And we only have one more event that officially is an ICQ event now between now and Christmas. And we're off to a local rally which is run by Sutton and Cheam's sister club, the Coulsdon Amateur Radio Society, known locally as CATS. And CATS are doing their CATS Bazaar, which will be there on the 24th of November. So quite looking forward to that. Really looking forward to having some fun.
Yeah, just to add on that, Martin, I spoke to Andy G0KZT the other day. Yeah. Coulsdon Amateur Transmitting Society, by the way. Just to confuse me, but Andy said he was really, really chuffed to hear a mention for the Cats Bazaar on the podcast, and he's looking forward to having the ICQ guys there with him.
I mean, don't get me wrong, guys. We enjoy going to National Hamfest, and we enjoy coming to all events we get invited to. But this one's a local one. We haven't got to get up at stupid o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
We haven't got a massive distance to come, and we know 90% of the people there. So it's kind of nice. We're just supporting a club in the local area at the end of the year, which is really nice.
So I think it's nice to do that, but I also think, okay, perhaps I'm biased because it is a sister club, but of all the different shows that we have around us, from the big ones like Kempton Park and things like that, I still think that if I was going to go to one in a year, the Cats Bazaar is going to be it. I think we just get. I just personally like it better as a show. I think it's a nice venue. What's there is there's lots of little traders and things, lots of little club stalls in it more than anything.
Yeah, there's not the big dealers there.
You don't have the big dealers there.
And there's nothing against the big dealers, but this is just It's more of a social event, really, isn't it? Come on, in fairness.
So Martin, are you saying this is the last event of the year? Blimey, hang on. So if it's not really the last few weeks, National Hamfest, RSGB convention, 2-day training course, exam weekends, and now Cat's Bazaar. That's the final. I mean, we get a weekend off, Martin.
No, don't be silly.
Can have a lie down.
This is the last weekend we get to go out and do something. I'm sure you and I will be
HMS Belfast. There'll be intermediate exam stuff we got to do. Yeah, the next we've got to rewrite the material for that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's never going to change, mate. You know.
No, okay, fair enough.
Well, we did mention, I won't go into details, but we did mention, Chris mentioned we're doing a training course at the moment, which we're thoroughly enjoying doing. Had an interesting piece of EMC problem in the car. You see, I decided, well, my car had to go in for an MOT, which is the Ministry of Transport test. And it meant that I needed to use Carol's car. And Carol, Mrs. B, has been using my car because her friends broke her arm and it's easy for her to get in and out when Carol takes her to the hospital. So I'm in my car and I've got full-blown interference on 2 meters. Tearing my hair out, thinking, oh yeah, well, maybe it's where I am. So I drove out the road about 5 miles, and it's still as strong as ever.
Can I make a guess?
Go on.
Is it an iPod?
No, it wasn't an iPod. Basically, what it was, she's got one of these clip-on chargers. So the charger has they're like 2 bits windings of a transformer. So in this device is the primary, and the secondary is in the phone, and you back them up together and they act like a transformer and charge. Yeah? And I know they run at about something like 32k or something, because they don't run at 50 cycles. But this one is smack, the harmonics on it is smack on 145 500, the calling frequency. Up or down, 12.5k, nothing.
They're also not very efficient when you measure them. That doesn't surprise me. I had exactly the same thing with an iPod. I was driving around, it was ages ago now, I was driving around like, who's keying up on S20? And it transpired it was my iPod. It just gives out a harmonic, and since then I've not used an iPod.
Do you know what? I had the same problem actually. We had an iPod years ago which had exactly the same feature, shall we say, yes.
So,
only when the screen was on, I noticed. When the screen went off, it stopped.
So it's interesting, and I thought I'd mention it because other people are probably going to have the same problem. But this is just outrageous how a lot of this equipment can cause interference. And I spoke to Mrs. B, and she said, "Ain't my problem. I don't have the radio on when I'm driving around." So no, you don't use 2 meters, dear, but because you ain't licensed, but. You know, that's a general public response. It ain't their problem. Mentioned RSGB convention. Thoroughly enjoyed that. Met lots of nice people there. And in some ways, we didn't get as much time there to interview some of the people we'd have liked. And I've got a few that I must catch up with afterwards. But, yeah, we did a session which we recorded. It was a round table session recorded at the RSGB Centre on an interesting topic, and I think you'll enjoy that one when that one's either on this episode or the next one. And one last thing, thank you, Martin, for GB3XP. I've thoroughly enjoyed using it over the last few days. I've been on C4FM, and I've had contacts all over the world. And before anybody says it's not real radio, I enjoy it when I'm going to work. Because there's nobody on local.
You're using a radio, it's a radio.
Yeah. And effectively, if there's nobody on analog or digital locally, then connecting to the internet. And I've had a lot of contacts with the States and Australia. Thoroughly enjoyed it, mate. So that's been a good one.
Hey, Martin.
Yeah.
What's the difference in that, in principle, than from doing a remote operation back to your home station through the internet?
Absolutely none at all, Frank.
Absolutely.
And there's so many of these things. But all I'm going to say on that subject is the hobby has to be fun. If you don't enjoy it, you don't do it. So just because I'm having fun in one area and somebody else isn't, Who cares? As long as
If they don't have fun with Fusion, then fine, go and play with something that you do have fun with. Then
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's been quite enjoyable when I've been going to work. Yeah, just hit the repeater, and there's been nobody local. I've hit the repeater, or connected to the internet, and had contact. So
do you know, I've actually had just out of interest, I had a look at the logs earlier on today. There's quite a few local people actually on it, although they're all connecting up and talking remotely. None of them are talking to each other, which is interesting because some of them are on at the same time.
yeah, oh well,
Yeah.
We'll see. So all in all, I think we've had a great session tonight, and I think the news stories were very, very interesting, especially the first one, which went long, but I always knew that the story on PACTOR was going to go long. So I'd like to thank Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, guys. Thank you, listeners, for listening in. And all the best.
Up with us.
Yeah.
Putting up with us, indeed, yes.
Yeah, putting up with us for 310, eh? That can't be bad. Mr. Rothwell M0SGL, thanks for joining us tonight.
You're very welcome. We always say when people come up, I've listened right back since the start. You know, our stock answer is, I'm so sorry. But, yeah, as Chris says, thank you for listening to us.
Yeah, if anybody complains about the audio now, just go back and listen to the first 10. You'll never complain again.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think I've ever listened to them.
Oh, you don't want to.
Not Tug by the Fuzz. That was a special, wasn't it, that one?
Oh, Tug by the Fuzz, yeah. Colin decided we were going to have a very interesting title, and the Fuzz was effectively a slang word for the police.
Yeah.
When I got and that one bombed because nobody understood what the title was. Oh dear. I'd like to thank Mr. Frank Howell K4FMH. Thanks, Frank.
Thank you for having me back on again. Enjoyed it, and it was very good to have SGL back on. He's been absent a time or two for one reason or another, so I've enjoyed his company in particular this time.
It is great to be back.
Yeah. I'm not reading the sign on his microphone because we are a clean rating.
Get in trouble.
Yeah.
Yes.
You should see my banner.
And I'd like to also thank Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP. Thanks, Ed, for joining us.
Yeah, very welcome, and thanks for the invite as always.
Yeah, no problem at all. And thanks to Mr. Bill Barnes, N3JIX, who had to leave a little while ago because he was on a hard stop.
Part-timer.
No. He's probably
I suspect kids are involved.
Yeah, he's probably on kid pickup duty, so picking the twins up, I would guess. So, Bill, good to have you. So I'd like to say 73s to you all. And we'll then move on to the next section. 73s, guys.
73, everyone.
Cheers, guys. 73.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. We start with news here in New York, where a radio amateur by the name of Howell K4FMH, I think it's pronounced, of Richmond Hill, Queens, has had a notice of apparent liability for forfeiture issued by the FCC in October. This is in relation to him causing repeated interference with a nearby amateur radio repeater in 2017 and 2018. And despite several verbal and written warnings from agents from the Enforcement Bureau, unfortunately this gentleman continued to interfere with the repeater until at least December last year. In addition to preventing other amateur radio operators from conducting legitimate communications, he also reportedly made threatening comments to other operators. These actions led to the Commission's decision to impose a penalty in the amount of $17,000 against him in connection with violation of his rules. So say news out of enforcement by the FCC of unfortunately someone causing problems in a repeater in that area. And we finish up the news in brief here with a news story from the UK that the RSGB youth team is recruiting, and they're looking to encourage young people in the hobby under the age of 26 years of age. Team has a youth champion, and they're currently looking for 10 members based far and wide across the UK. As I say, so they're covering all aspects of the UK with their team, with a large range of skills on electronic engineering, teaching, and even some members who are still at school. Now, it's not a committee, as a youth team. They're looking for members to support the activities of bringing people on the air. You don't even need to be licensed to take part in this. All you need is a keen interest in radio. So anyone interested in getting involved, drop an email to youth.champion@rsgb.org.uk. Well, now we head over to our features episode, and the question is, should you merge, grow, or disband your amateur radio club? Hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. Last session after lunch, and I'm going to try and make sure that none of you fall asleep. So if I was doing a presentation, you might see sort of misspelt slides, but they've been through that and won't let me do that anymore. But interestingly, I'm going to try and keep you awake. One of the things we've had over the last number of years is seeing a decline in clubs. And it worries me because our hobby's declining because of the clubs. And Kamal done a great talk this morning on how we should move forward. Today, moving forward, thinking about it, and I want to generate a discussion on this, but how do we take the club forward? There are a number of clubs that they're declining. They're declining because they're not moving forward. Looking around the room, and I don't mean this nastily, guys, but there are very few of us, if at all, that are in our 20s. There are a lot of old boys who...
Hang on, Moss, we've got one.
Got one. Got two. Yeah. Hey, fine. But in essence, a lot of the old boys, including me in a few years' time probably, don't want to go out on a winter's night because they don't like driving in the dark. So your clubs are going to fall apart because of that. Your clubs are probably going to fall apart because people that took their licenses years and years ago and have been very comfortable suddenly find themselves a bit isolated with the new technology that's coming forward. And it's very, very easy to say, I'm sorry, I don't understand that. Can you tell me? But instead, society turns round and says, I'll take the mickey out of that person because I don't understand, but if I make him look an idiot, everybody will laugh with me. And I think we have to embrace new technology. Now, I'm going to pass over to Ian initially. You've done a lot on this with the RSGB, developing youth within the RSGB, but we certainly need to do now something for the clubs, and merging them is possibly an option. What do you think, Ian?
Yeah, I was handed only recently, but I had looked at these articles before. This goes back several years when we started to look at this and had lack of engagement, I think would be the best way of describing it, with clubs. And Nick Henwood, the president at the time, did a presentation here, and it was videoed, and it's on YouTube, and I've got the details here if anybody wants to look at it later. But this is a slow process. This is not going to happen overnight. And there have been a couple of other articles which I've got here. Feel free to come and have a look at them afterwards. But the whole essence is that there are other opportunities for clubs to embrace, to look at new ways of doing things. But the clubs that I'm a member of 3 clubs in the sticks. Lincoln Shortwave Club, the biggest of the 3, large player in the National Hamfest. The focus of their attention every year, they have something to do always for that, so that keeps them going. Melton Mowbray Club, I was advised just this lunchtime, they've just sold all their equipment, or most of their equipment, all their mobile equipment. So they've got money in the bank, but no equipment, which is rather sad, because they used to be a great operating club. What are they going to do instead? I don't know. The third club is a virtual club, which doesn't meet at all, other than online. They're active, but it goes in waves. 1 week there'll be 50 postings, next week there'll be none at all. Why is that? Oh, it's holiday time, or whatever. Is that an active club, or is it not an active club? Depends on your definitions. So that's just for a starter of 10, 3 different clubs that I know about, 3 different solutions or 3 different problems, whichever way you're looking from.
Yeah, I think we're in a situation, and let's be honest, guys. All of us like to protect our own little empire. You know, you got a club, and it's this is my membership. This is my group. I want to protect mine. And instead of opening up and saying, if you do good things for your club, what will happen is you won't lose members if you're looking after your membership. Whereas if you don't do the right thing, you will lose membership. But as Ian said, and he's brought up a very interesting one, and I'll cover that in a minute, but virtual clubs are starting to appear. They might very much be where we go. 20 years ago, when I was first joined the committee of the club I'm on at the moment, they used to think that email was the work of the devil. You laugh. They used to think email was the work of the devil. A lot of people 5 years ago, social media was the work of the devil. Where do we find most of our youngsters? Playing on social media. So just because I'm in my 60s doesn't mean to say that I shouldn't embrace the new technology. And if I don't embrace it, I'll get left behind. Richard, do you want to have a say on that one?
Thank you. Yes, just a bit about me, because some of you won't know me. Name is Richard Thomas. I chair the Mid-Somerset Amateur Radio Club. I've done that for a year. I stepped straight into the chair from outside because nobody else would. My background is not, I am an amateur, but my real interest is in social structures and the way that people communicate, and particularly the way people belong to organizations. I've actually done some research on that and a book on it. So that's my background. Very briefly, I want to introduce you to a thought, and that thought has a technical word. It's called disintermediation. Big word. It means getting rid of the middleman. And society has changed so much because of that. It's been a driver in all the technological revolutions that Kamal was talking about. It's happened in society. Think of Amazon, okay, completely cutting out the middleman. You go direct to Amazon to buy your stuff. You get quality products direct to your door. Cutting out the middleman, disintermediation. A lot of our clubs were there as middlemen for amateur radio. People had no choice if they wanted to engage in amateur radio but to go to clubs in the 1950s. That no longer applies. And my mantra is now, think hubs, not clubs. Think hubs that can provide all the things that amateurs want, and indeed other people want. An operating station, teaching, which is about transformation, not about information, it's about transformation. It provides technical experience, and it provides a place for new people to come and learn. But if we persist in the old-fashioned 1950s approach of saying clubs are the necessary intermediaries, those clubs will die and other things will take their place, such as the... Now, if you can develop hubs for amateur radio, my proposition is, and that those hubs can be linked through social media, through internet connectivity, or whatever connectivity is coming in the fourth industrial revolution, then the hobby will prosper, because those hubs will not be just about amateur radio, they'll be about anything radio, and we'll be able to develop. So that's my platform to speak on.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Now, in my layman's terms, would you suggest a hub is very much like a regional club, where a lot of clubs have got together, pooled their resources, and then gone off and used their experience to grow?
Yes, I would. I think that hubs need to have the materials that people who want to engage in radio or in wireless need. First of all, an operating station.
Really important that people come and have hands-on experience. Secondly, transformative teaching. People don't just want information. They can get bags of information off the internet. What they want is engagement with a hub in which they can transform their skills, their experience, and they can grow. It requires clubs to think differently and to pool resources, and in an area to say, how can we best serve this area? Not to be, our clubs in our area are competitive. They don't work together. When I did, your president's brought this, I threw this article at Radcom, fed up with the competition that was going on. I got told, we don't want a suit from the RSGB telling us how to run our club. That was put online, referring to my article. That kind of thinking has to stop.
Yeah. Carmel, would you like to give us your thoughts on this one?
Okay, firstly, I think what you said earlier, despite you thinking it's not true, I think it is. Email was created by the devil.
Yeah, or his son.
Okay, if we've cleared that, then yes, I'm very much in line with Richard's thinking. The hub and spoke approach. We've got clubs all over the geographical areas, small towns, in distances short enough where there shouldn't be two clubs. So if they can all be linked back into a hub, which is kind of like the center of activity, I think that makes a lot of sense. And to add on, if you look at the bigger cities, it's really just not possible to finish work and get to a club meeting. It's just not practical. I've tried it in London. I live in London. I've tried it. The closest club to me is in Hammersmith. It takes about 1.5 hours to get there on a Friday evening, which is when they meet. I tried it in Auckland in New Zealand, 1 hour. Kuala Lumpur in Penang, Malaysia, just can't be done. It's just too difficult. The traffic. In Kuala Lumpur, it's worse. It's the torrential rain and the thunderstorms. Okay, but if we could build virtual clubs through video participation, video Skype or any other platform, but video, and if every time the club meets virtually, if we could have someone give a lecture from somewhere, it could be from America, as we just did, the last one, because there's no more geographical restriction. If we could do that, I'd go back to what Dave, our NYT from America, said last night. He said two things about clubs. First is, he said, clubs that build their activities around families succeed. And second is, he said, 80% of clubs that have educational content retain membership. So we could do the second bit, educational content, through virtual clubs.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I've been ragged a couple of times over reporting what goes on in Cyprus. And the Cyprus guys, their amateur radio club is a family affair. They do a lot of things where the whole family turn up. Barbecues around the pool. Now, looking outside today at the weather, none of us want to sit around a pool, but in the winter in the UK. But yeah, I think what you're saying is very good. Chris, do you want to have the last say on this section? And we will open up to questions, and I really would like some questions from you. You're all sitting very quiet. But Chris, what do you think so far?
Yeah, okay. So I'm a club secretary for a club in Southland. In fact, Kamal, come and join our club. We'll welcome you along. I think each club's got its own personality. I think you will see our hobby is very diverse. People do satellites, people do contesting, people do network radio, people do all kinds of different things. And I think we looked at our membership, and we did a survey actually a couple of years ago and asked, what is it people want to get involved? What is it that excites you? And we got back many different answers. There was no simple thing to say we want to do this. It was everyone wants to do the bit of the hobby that they're interested in, which actually makes it quite difficult, because we need to be providing a sort of a general service to our members so they can benefit and learn new things. I think the point about the fact the world's got smaller, we've now got social media, we can do video content, we've got your podcasts even, you can listen to, there's lots of information out there. You no longer have to go along to a club to see a talk to find out about something. You can go onto YouTube, there's huge amounts of content there. There's, like you said, virtual clubs, online clubs. There's an awful lot there to choose from. So I think we have to try and figure out, well, what's the flavour of your club and what can you do best to serve your membership? And I think that I did read Richard's article actually at the time. I didn't realise you were the person who wrote it, but actually I read that with interest. And the middleman has gone. We don't need the club providing that middle service. I think you're absolutely right. I think that is no longer required. I think the things that are required, like you say, the kind of hands-on stuff, the training, they've been able to provide the advice, being able to. And also, clubs also provide a community. They provide a something to go and do. It's not just about the technical aspects of the hobby. It's actually a social thing as well. And I think we need to make sure we retain that. And I think that's not something you're going to get from YouTube or frankly a podcast.
Yes, can I just build on that a fraction? One of the great advantages of having a hub and a network is that the network members themselves begin to direct what activities are both wanted and required, rather than the centre dictating that. I think that is hugely important. For example, you could have a group who are interested in aerial building and propagation over a specific issue. Perhaps somebody's just moved into a house. You could then, from that network, precipitate out a little group to support them and to think about that. That would then lead to a hub activity, and then the whole thing then dissipates after a few months because the issue has solved. All of that comes not from the centre, but from the network of connectivity that you've built around the hub.
Yeah. Well, in fairness, we've covered what we think's going on with the local clubs. Now, at the risk of me missing somebody, and I'm going to miss lots of people out, but these are just the ones that come to my mind straight away. The successful clubs, if you think of it, the successful clubs are unique. I interviewed the Long Island CW Club for the podcast about 3 months ago. They've grown phenomenally from nothing because they're supplying CW training and people want that. Equally, people like GQRP and AMSAT as well, they're niche clubs and they tend to grow and hold their membership. So, do we need to have niche clubs? That's one question I'm going to answer. Number two, and at the risk of missing another group of people out, the virtual club. We got Pete here from Essex Hams. We got a nice lady from Suffolk Red. Suffolk.
Get it right, Martin.
Suffolk Red, yeah. You guys operate pretty much virtual clubs. Yeah, you're nodding and shaking your head. But unless we have these things that come along, there are so many things that we can be doing to improve your interest. Now, I'm a member of Essex Hams. I don't live in Essex, I live in Surrey. But he still allows me to be a member because I'm interested to see what he does. However, Pete, and I think it's fair to say, some of your members are very, very active. There will be others that are not very active in the Essex arena, including me, but not because I don't want to be, because I have time issues, but I still want to be involved with what you guys do. So I think I'm going to pass it back to Ian. What do you think about the niche in the virtual clubs, and do they fit a market?
I think they do, because my activity club-wise is mainly focused on exactly those. They are special interest groups, and something I pushed last year was to give them a focus within the RSGB. And we now have a person who's dedicated to listening, making contact or whatever with those. They are virtual clubs. Look at VMARS, the Vintage Military and Amateur Radio Society. They only meet when they have typically their auctions of equipment, usually near Coventry at Baggington. They attend Hamfest, they attend the Norbreck in the north. They go all over the place, they're very visible, but they don't meet on a Friday night in a shack somewhere. Never do they do that. But the expertise that's there for the asking is there. They have a very good website. They have an archive of all the Army documents, of all the Army radios going back to, I don't know how long. Huge, which if you remember, you buy a radio, you want to know what that valve is or what that circuit does or whatever, they've got it. What's wrong with that? That is great value to me. You've mentioned GQRP, another very successful club, huge membership. I think about the same size as VMARS. And there are many others, but a lot of them are created from special interests, be that Royal Signals, be that naval, be that military, like VMARS, be it whatever. There's a huge diversity, and I think there's nothing wrong with that at all. Our attempt in the RSGB is to try and cross-fertilise that these services are out there. If you haven't heard of a military radio and you bought an old set from, or you handed down to you by your father or whatever and want to get it working again, there is a club out there that will allow you to do that and support you. And that, I use that as an example because it's one I know, but there are many, many others like that.
There are, and I'm sure we've missed out on a few of them. And I will make one apologies to a group that's in this room, helping out today, helping us. Cam Hams, you're another kind of virtual club, a group of guys that do interesting things. So that's good. Richard, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, I want to go a little bit further, I think, than talking about the special interest groups. They are, in my model, they are a hub, and it has a national radius for network, so that if you're interested, you can do that. But I actually want to go further than that and say, if two things. First of all, if we can develop, if this is thought to be a good model, the hub model, and we develop that, we can do what Jamal was saying earlier, which is to spread out the concept away from just amateur radio into communications, into wireless, into bringing other people together in terms of partnerships. If you do that, if you can do that in a hub, and then you can spread that around with the connectivity of your network, you then get all sorts of creative ideas coming out. That's the first response I'd make to the conversation so far. And the second is that actually we do need to move away from the word club, in my view, because it's holding everybody back. The word club carries a whole lot of baggage with it, and language is important. And if we can begin to start changing that thinking, then all sorts of other people, young people who are only connecting through the internet, only connecting in social media, only connecting with the things they want to do, can begin to see this as some place where they will feel welcome, rather than associating with a club, the word of which carries baggage, which alienates. I hate to say it, but I think it does.
Yeah, I think go on, Ian.
Yeah, could I just come back on that and use the other word which we use associated with club, which is amateur?
Yes.
Because that is another no word. Yes. We are amateur radio enthusiasts. I don't know what picture that generates in the average members of the public, but it's not necessarily a good one.
So on that, I think you're absolutely right with that. I think with clubs, to be, it's the image, isn't it? It's the amateur radio person. You get a 20-year-old walk in for the first time, bunch of old blokes in there. So, do I really fit in here? Is this really for me? It's helped me. I think we've got an image issue, put it that way. And I think the club. And I think with clubs you also get a lot of politics, like you said, the baggage. You get little cliques and this sort of thing, and really that's not helpful and doesn't really help to move things forward. I think we need to be much more open and like you say, welcoming to newcomers.
Clement, you want to add anything on this one?
I'll probably get shot for saying this by Ian.
Can I stand out?
Should RSGB be the first hub to create the model?
Well, I think the structure of our hobby is very much revolves around clubs. I think the way we're set up at the moment is very much geared towards clubs, and maybe that, I don't know. I mean, does that come from the RSGB, or is that something that we've just ourselves kind of put in place? Or do you disagree with me?
That came as a bit of a sideswipe. I wasn't expecting that one. I think you are right. Whether that's the right model for the RSGB to jump in with both feet, I'm not sure. But certainly the regional structure that we have is a reasonable place to start. And some of those already do that. They cross-fertilise clubs to do big activities like contests. They do that with education, with some clubs helping other clubs where they haven't got the tutors' expertise that they need, and so on and so forth. It's a good idea.
But Essex Ham has it. I mean, delighted to see Essex. I've been a member of Essex Ham, and I live in Somerset. Essex Ham is a good starting model. Yes, I would love to see the RSGB begin some pilots. I think we need to learn together with this, and we need to play. I'm a great fan of playing. We need to play with these ideas. We need to play and experiment. If the RSGB could set up a couple of pilots in a couple of willing regions, we would learn an enormous amount from that, from thinking about how to develop hubs, how they work, how they don't work. We would learn from the competitive, cooperative tensions that exist between clubs at the moment. We'd learn a little bit more about resourcing. But it requires something like the RSGB to be the initiator, the grit, if you like, that produces the diamond. The RSGB is well equipped for this kind of thing, and I think it should be doing it. Is my answer.
Well, I would go slightly different, and this is a discussion. I sometimes think that us amateurs put the RSGB up on this pedestal and say, why isn't the RSGB doing it? Why isn't the RSGB doing this, that and the other? Hang on a minute. Have we spoke to the RSGB about this? Have we got off our derriere? And they'll bleep that one out. But have we contacted the RSGB and said, hey, I've got this idea. Can you support us? Can you sponsor us? Whatever. But if... It's also easy to kick somebody and say, oh, it's this guy's fault. Now, I've had that. There's one person, I'm not ever going to embarrass him or give you his call sign, but I did an interview with him about a year ago on the podcast. And the first part of the interview was about what he said he was going to talk to me about. The second part of the interview was he wanted to pick a fight with the RSGB. He sent me an email the other day wanting to pick a fight with Ofcom. Now, come on, you just can't blow it in the air without doing anything. You've got to be involved, all of us, and I say you, but me as well. We've all got to be involved in moving this forward. We can't just say, Ian's the chairman of the RSGB, that's his problem. No, it's a collective, all of our problems, to help grow it. Would you not agree?
Certainly I would, after the last... Oh, sorry, something. Certainly I would agree, wholeheartedly. But I have to temper the enthusiasm of saying, here's an idea, let's run with it, with the availability of resources to manage it. We have finite resources, only about 12 full-time equivalents, paid staff, to do all the management, and they can't possibly do all that as well as run the ship. It's a huge, huge task. Yeah. So, management taking forward is done by volunteers. And there's 800, 900, we don't know exactly how many, but an awful lot of very dedicated people. And it's a job in itself to keep them motivated, happy. It's really difficult. I can almost say we are trying very hard.
It certainly is. Now, guys, I'm going to hold you just for a second because I know we're probably going to run fairly long. I've already pre-warned them that we're likely to overrun. But we haven't had anybody from the audience who wants to ask a question.
We've got some volunteers.
You keep mentioning the term hub. How is that any different from the existing virtual clubs?
I read Essex Ham and I see that as a connectivity to existing clubs. Forgive me if I've got it wrong, but that's how I see it. The difference between connectivity with a hub is that a hub becomes something much stronger, much more centered, with a lot more resources than the average club can manage. The average club cannot do everything. We've heard all the way through this conference about having different groups of hobbyists within the amateur radio spectrum. If you come and want to operate a station, if you're a technical person and your club can't afford a station, then you're going to look elsewhere. If you want to have a course to learn an exam, well, you'll find that somewhere, but it may not be in your area. The point is that a club cannot provide all of these things, whereas if you work at it as a region and bring your resources together, the hub very probably can provide most of them. It's beginning to happen already. It is actually, and this is where I say I think the RSGB, in my view, is an extremely important hub, both nationally and internationally, because you really cannot treat this as a national issue, both in terms of the problem and in terms of some of the work that has to be done. So a national hub like the RSGB provides resources, it provides technical skills, it provides creative thinking. The communities, the regions, have all that at a more local level. So if you can bring those together and create a hub where people can come and actually experience, grow, develop, that, have I explained it well enough for you? It's no longer the 1950s middleman. It's a huge collection of regional and local resources.
So the collaborative working that I've been carrying out for the last 18 months between Essex Hams, Cam Hams and Suffolk Red, is that your idea of a hub?
I would say that's my idea of it. I don't actually know what's been happening, but from what you've said, it sounds to me like connectivity that's growing, and that's great. If that then precipitates out into a centre where people can come and operate a radio station, where they can come and learn, where they can come and get support, then yes. I don't know enough about what you're doing.
That is what Suffolk Red is.
Great. Yes. And the answer's yes then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And maybe you're ahead of the game plan, and maybe that when we look at how we're going to set these things up, or if people want them set up that way, we look at what you've done. And it has to start somewhere. And if you've invented the model, or you've actually got the physical model working, great. I have no problems with that.
Can I just come in there and just illustrate I won't take a second, that on the international arena, just think back to the summer and the challenge from the French to the 144, 146 frequency allocation. The RSGB, wearing its international hat with a huge amount of expertise within its ranks, you know who they are, I won't go through them all again, together with the German, Italian, Swiss, and goodness knows how many other national societies, killed that for the moment. And that would not have been possible without international cooperation on the sort of level that Richard has talked about. We had a lot more expertise than some of the countries, but they learned from our expertise, we learned from their political expertise, and we were successful. So it does work.
Afternoon, M0SGL Golf Huntingdon Amateur Radio Society. We don't use the word club, but I think you're working from a derriere backwards position. The clubs aren't dying, or the hobby isn't dying because of the clubs. The clubs are dying because of the hobby, which, as Kemmel was saying, we're not relevant, we're not visible, and we don't have personalities out there in front. So I don't think you should be trying to dismember clubs. You should be trying to improve recruitment and getting us more members.
I think where you're coming from is valid. Let's face it, I chose the title for this talk predominantly to get people in here and get you talking.
Good.
Yeah?
Oh, yes, fairness, you're going to hear us.
We want to hear you talking. If I put a title up and said, ICQ are going to talk about it's rosy in the garden, is it? And it's all great. I'd have had about 3 people in the room, and one of those have been Anna keeping an eye on me. So, come on. In fairness, guys, I kind of picked a title that would stimulate you to get you in, because we want to hear what you're going to say. I don't know it all. I'll stick my hand up now and say, I'm never going to know it all. We want to hear what you've got to say.
Yeah. And the other, Richard, your first statement, your initial statement, described our club absolutely perfectly. We do education, we do exams, we do special events, we do all kinds of things. We've grown over the last 3 years from about 50 members to 70 odd members. We have 30 or 40 turn up at meeting nights twice a month. And, you're trying to kill that.
No, exactly the opposite, if I may say so. What I'm saying is that is exactly what a hub should become.
It's not a hub, it's a club.
Yeah. The problem I have with the word club.
Well, that's your personal problem.
The problem I have with the word club is that it carries an enormous amount of baggage with it. It is, if you'll forgive the technical language again, it is actually a closed set organisation. It has boundaries. People either are in it as members or they are not. It is technically closed set. What I would like to see is a move towards what is technically centre set, where people can come in and out, where their membership is not defined by their subscription to a particular place, but by their interest in a particular issue. I know it's a difficult concept, but if you can think centre set, please use Mr. Google if you want, but look up centre set rather than closed set. That's my concern about using the concept of club. What you're doing is superb. It takes an enormous amount of work, an enormous amount of energy. It requires sufficient footfall, sufficient population to be able to do that. And in many parts of the country, we simply don't have those things.
Well, yeah, I can appreciate you've got to do things in isolated parts. We're lucky. As I say, our membership is growing. So down to this guy on my left. But another thing that I find about your statements, Amazon is the middleman.
It's an interesting one. But going back to your previous statement, I congratulate you. Your club's doing well. Chris and I are from the same club. Our club's doing well. If you were just down the road from us and we joined forces, we'd have an even better opportunity to service the amateur market and to improve our membership knowledge, more activities and things like that. And I think that's where the hub part is coming in. Not that we're trying to close your club down, because no, we're not. I see. That was the discussion today, was to find out, hey, where we're going, what we're trying to do. And
yeah, we're close to Camshams, Cedark, Bedford, and Peterborough, and our members are members of their clubs, and members of their clubs are members of our club. So everything what goes round comes round, and everybody goes everywhere. So it's it works well. But
there's
the individual clubs attract individual people.
Fix it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
We've got no
There's
intention
an awful
of
lot of clubs in this area that are broke.
Yeah.
A huge amount.
Well, this is why we don't want the RSGB laying down the law and disintegrating clubs.
Yeah,
Don't look amazed. You said it was a good idea to look into these hubs and what have you.
Yeah, I do agree that it's a good idea. That doesn't mean to say that the RSGB has no power to lay down the law on anything. It does the will of its members, or it tries to.
Yeah, and the one abiding thing, I will go now and give somebody else a chance. The one abiding thing about our club, although we call ourselves a society, everybody likes each other. We like meeting, we like talking, we like interacting with each other. We've got expertise from degreed engineers to schoolboys. Our youngest member is about 10 years old, and we do everything from A to Z. We take them through all, and we're now a registered examination centre, so we can take them all the way through to advanced. We have our own radio. we set up every special event station going, although, to be quite honest, the support from the membership isn't brilliant. It's the same people every time who go sit in front of the radios and do all the communicating. See a lot of people are nodding their heads there, but at least the guys who do it enjoy it, and it is open to anybody who wants to join.
Yeah, well, I think you're doing right as a club, and a lot of what you're saying is right, but we're just giving you an opportunity to discuss. But I don't think the whole thing of, yeah, you're great. In South London, there are a lot of clubs that are struggling. Our club isn't. But that doesn't mean to say we wouldn't work with others. That doesn't mean to say that we wouldn't make it better. And quite honestly, there are other clubs in our area. And it's starting now. It's starting at chairman level, where the chairman of 3 or 4 clubs now all get on very, very well. And we are becoming more integrated. And we're not worried about losing our membership to the club down the road, because we're doing the right thing. But when we want to go out and do something, if we want to do SSB Field Day, we might say to the club down the road, do you want to come and operate? I'm never going to win the contest. We don't enter to win. We enter to have a bit of fun and play on the radio. And those of you who are contesters are probably going to stick knives in my back now. But it's about getting people together and enjoying. And that's, I think, where we're coming. We're running a little bit late, and this poor gentleman's waited a long time.
Steve G0EAK from Workshop Amateur Radio Society. I echo a lot of what the gentleman from there has just said. We're very successful, 160 odd members, meeting twice a week, but we do provide, in effect, what is a hub, not only in terms of the facilities we provide. We're very fortunate. We've got our own building, so it's dedicated. But equally, we're pulling people that are driving an hour and a half, even though they've got other clubs far more local to them, which sort of demonstrates that we must be doing something right. But equally, going against the virtual club is when we put talks on, there's people attend those talks who wouldn't have considered what the subject matter was if they hadn't been at the club listening to the talk, and it broadens their horizons, and it's broadened my horizons with things I never thought I'd be interested in, and so I think it has to be mix and match an awful lot. I know that there's a move to develop more activities through a Brickworks program within the RSGB, and I'd be interested to see how that develops. But I'd also just take issue with one little point that this gentleman said, and he said it's not about the clubs, it's about RSGB getting more members for the clubs. I think we've all got a responsibility to promote the hobby and bring more people in.
One word, I'd say, it's our hobby.
Yes,
our
exactly.
Yeah. Chris?
And just on the point you made about broadening horizons, I absolutely agree. I've been to many club talks about a subject I knew nothing about, and I thought, you know what, I might give that a try, actually. So I think that is something a club does bring that you wouldn't necessarily get. If you're on the internet, you've got to go and search for something, and actually, you don't know what you don't know.
That's exactly right, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on out there, I think. And I keep coming back. It's not one individual. It's not one society, it's not one club, it's all of us. And we aren't all going to agree today, but let's talk about it. Let's get the ideas out in the open.
How you doing? Dave, call sign 2I0SJV, and I'm part of the Mid-Ulster Amateur Radio Club. And I must say, what we have found, we're one of the larger clubs in Region 8, with 60 plus members, that we have a saying in Region 8, we're just one club that meets in different locations. across our region, and that comes down from our regional rep as well. So if other clubs are doing different events, you would be posting it out to us. We have a regional newsletter that other clubs in our country doing events. We go to other club meetings because we want to support other clubs and other members, and we take every opportunity to co-activate on special event stations. We've done it with neighbouring clubs because it's amateurs supporting amateurs in one hobby, and I must say within Region 8 we've found things actually on the up more than in the decline in our clubs.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that's working for you in Region 8. Yeah, and I really am. And I think, I'm hoping that most of you have got something from this. You know, there's a lot of interesting things happening out there. You know, I'm going to throw another one into the mix of, as our memberships gets older and some of the old boys, including me in a few years' time, probably won't want to go out after it gets dark, do we have our meetings, our club talks, as online meetings? And therefore they can see. Now, you disagree with that. And you're right, probably, because the social interaction will be gone. But if you lose one of your members for 6 months of the year because they won't go out because it's dark.
Conversely, a lot of the older people, they don't like the technology, so they actually like to come out to the club.
Well, can I just make another comment on that? We had a talk a number of months ago by one of our members on satellites, and we decided that we would stream it because we knew a lot of people couldn't make it to the club meeting. And it was actually, we had an interactive Q&A as well, and a lot of people loved it, and it sparked a direction in our club where we've now got satellite stations, and other clubs around the region are getting involved in it. I think we have to embrace, as well as social media and emails and everything else, and yeah.
I agree with you totally. And although I throw in the video, joining a video group, we've had success and we've had failure from it. We had a very interesting gentleman from the States do a Morse talk, and Dan Romachek's very, very good at Morse. He's a big blogger in the States. He's also a member of the ICQ podcast, so he's a good guy. We also, this year, we were supposed to have Bob Howell join us. And a week before he was going to join us on a video link, he couldn't make it. So you can set people up and get people to do these talks. If it's a video link, they're fairly short and they live a long way away, they might actually blow you out.
So I think you're describing where you had members darling remotely viewing your talk. Yes, that's kind of the opposite we're doing, but we've done the opposite way around. We've had people doing talks for members remotely, so somebody sat, in this case in the States, for our club. So I guess you can do it both ways. Hang on, let's get the microphone.
Let's give you a microphone.
Yeah, just a quick one. Your last comment about people not wanting to go out. We already have that problem. I'm a designated chauffeur to my next door neighbour. But apart from that, we're trying to get the kids off the computers and their Xboxes, and you're suggesting we go back and sit on the computers.
No, there's a vote for both. In fairness, the biggest problem today is with the children is we're not getting to them to be able to show them what we do. If you sit in front of a youngster and you show them something we do, they soak it up like a sponge. The biggest problem now is that parents wrap their children in cotton wool. And there were bad people around when I was growing up. There were bad people when all of us were growing up. The problem today is, if you have a bad person in your village that does something a bit naughty, the parents know about it within a half a second of it happening, and it's all over social media. So things happen a lot quicker. Children are isolated. Now, in fairness, we're protecting them too young. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but you and I can't show somebody something that will excite them. Sorry, there's lots of people now put their hands up. The young man, let's go to the young gentleman over there and then to the young gentleman.
Hi, Chris G7DDN. I'm a member of Withall Radio Club, a very successful club in Birmingham with about 80 members. I'd just like to say that what I'm hearing from the panel is one of the most exciting things I've heard at a convention, and I've been coming for about 8 years now. And I think one of the problems we have in society in general is that social structures are different. So whereas in the 50s, as Richard referred to them, we might have a radio club with a sort of top-down structure, chairman, secretary, treasurer, committee, and you have the usual problem of who wants to stand for chairman, who's going to be on the committee, who's going to do this. What we have now is a movement that's bottom-up. People actually decide what they want to do, and they say, this is what we're going to do. And the committee and the chair play very little role in it at all. Now, we see this in other ways in our village. We have a village community group. It's got over 10,000 members on Facebook. People just throw things in. Can you recommend me someone who can fit some flooring? Can you do this? Does anyone know anything about this? We saw this in the village the other day. Watch out, there's some people around or whatever. Do you think we would actually be able to start a club and get people to come along to it? It just wouldn't work, because the whole structure of it is different because of social media. And I totally get what Richard's saying about it being bottom up. And if we apply that to our radio clubs, what we actually have is people dipping in and out of radio clubs. And we see this in our own club. We have people who come along to find something out about something, then they disappear again. And some of the folk are going, but they haven't joined up, they haven't become members. And it's missing the point. We need to be listening to the people from the bottom up and providing what they want and allowing them opportunities to come. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. Now, we're about to run out of time. I promised this gentleman over here, I'm afraid he's going to have to be the last one. However, and this is only a time constraint here, if you didn't ask your question, please email it into info@ICQ podcast, and we will answer your question.
.com.
And we'll go from there, yeah? Oh,
ICQpodcast.com.
that's it. I'll get the web address right and the email address right one day. Last question, sir, from yourself.
Hi, this is a bit less of a question than as a response to your comment. Derek, MW0LNA. I'm with the Cardiff University Club, and I'd like to first strongly object to the statement that it's hard to get students and young people out. We have we have nothing but the opposite. Every time we've approached a scout group or a high school group or any sort of group like that, we've received nothing but unbounded, absolute enthusiasm about having these events run, and there's been a tremendous support for that. So I think the idea that it's hard to get youth out at events is very, very wrong. If you approach, there's a lot of support for that.
What you're actually saying, and I agree with you, and I'm not backtracking, when you get to somebody, look, I'm passionate about radio. I'll bore the hell out of you for 4 hours if you want, because I'm that passionate about it. When you get to somebody and you can show them and you're passionate about your hobby, that is when you will get lots of people involved. We have in the past, and I'll make this the last statement, we have in the past had lots of people that passed their test umpteen years ago, that when a youngster walks in the club and says, hey, I just worked the States, and they go, yeah, got the T-shirt, wrote the thesis, yeah, I've seen the video. Now, you can't tell me they weren't on cloud nine when they first worked the States. We have to show some enthusiastic information back to people when they do something that's big in their life. And I don't know, if I had got to you chatting with you and I'd shown you various bits and pieces, I'm sure you'd have been very enthused about it. We've got youngsters in our club that are very enthused about amateur radio. But you've got to get to those people first. And most of them don't know about our hobby. So where you're getting to people, that's the easy. It's easy once you've got there. And I'm not decrying what you're doing. I'm saying it's easy when you've actually made that contact to get people into the hobby. Does that make sense?
It does. I think it's really convenient that every youth has to go to school.
Yeah.
So we've got a captive audience there. And just the other thing I wanted to say is I really appreciate the statement that language is important, and I think I'm going to run back and make some changes to the way we as a group express ourselves and what we're trying to do, because a lot of what we do is trying to provide a hub-based service to people in the university and in the area. The one thing I think that I have failed as a leader of our club and as a member of the community is that we don't have great communication with the other clubs in the area, and we don't have that sharing of resources other than at a leader-to-leader level, like, oh, let's plan a mutual event. It should be much more peer-to-peer.
You haven't failed. You haven't failed. You just hadn't thought about it. And by discussions like this, open up lots of ideas back to you. Hopefully, useful ideas. Now, guys,
Actually, just before you wrap up there, very, very quickly, because I think probably we've got two halves. So it's Colin M6BOY, the founder of the ICQ podcast. I think we've got two potential groups of people here in the room. I think we've got those that are succeeding and those that potentially, could help drive. Because don't get me wrong, guys, we're seeing lots of positivity and we're doing this and we're doing etc., which is great. But it is in contrast to the general feeling in the hobby. So what I would challenge you guys, and I know this from creating content about amateur radio now for 11 years, a very, very small sliver of our society are creators. I used to think it was 10% create, 90% consume. I would suggest today 2% create and 98% consume. If you are a successful, succeeding club, it is your responsibility for our hobby for you to engage with those that are failing, those that are struggling, etc., and show them the way forward and the positive you're doing. Those of you that are struggling, it's your responsibility, I think, to put your hand up to those people and say, guys, show us how we can do it. Because by doing that, we all grow and we all win. And so, guys, it's very, very easy to go from a consumer to a creator just by opening up your mind. So that would be how I would sum it up to guys. So those that are succeeding, and you've got guys on the panel that are passionate as well, I say, guys, work together and create something and push it through to everyone else afterwards. That's how I would leave it there.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. Right, well, I'm terribly sorry, but we've overrun, as I did tell the RSGB we would. I think you need to get downstairs to see if you won those wonderful prizes. And listen, guys, thank you very, very much for your time.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, Dad, certainly a very interesting debate there at the RSGB convention, and certainly wasn't it wonderful having so many people attending talk on grow, merge and disband your club, and it's great to get a ton of feedback from the room, wasn't it?
Certainly was, Colin, and in fairness, I'm sure we could have got far more content. We were supposed to do 45 minutes. I think we run fairly close to 55 minutes there, and I think the audience enjoyed the participation, and if we hadn't have had to pull the plug on it, I'm sure we'd have been there a minimum of another half an hour, if not longer. So unfortunately, we had to cut the plug, but it was certainly some audience participation and things just to make you think about where your club may be going. And I kind of like the idea of hubs as well as clubs.
Certainly, I think one of the things that I took listening back to the session as I edited it for the show is I think people were very vocal in that group to say that they were doing the right thing, as if say, oh, well, my club's great. But what's actually probably more relevant was the amount of people in the room that didn't speak up. And what I spoke to a couple of people afterwards, and I know everyone else did as well. But I think, thankfully, those that were quiet in the room were the ones that were listening to how other clubs were achieving, and certainly, looking for those gain points. And as I said at the end of the feature, so few people create anything anymore in this society. So, if you need help, hopefully that the local clubs around that are succeeding should be looking at you and saying, yeah, I'll help you as a fellow creator sort of thing of something good. And don't be scared to put your hand up. I mean, that was certainly my takeaway from that event.
Yeah, and I agree with you. There were a lot of people nodding in agreement to a lot of things that were coming from the platform. Unfortunately, it doesn't show up on the video, but I think we're going to get both sides of the story, and we always will. So it was an initial get people talking. Let's look at how we can develop our hobby. Let's look at how we can save clubs that are failing. Because even a failing club that may only have half a dozen members now, they're interested in radio, and B, if they're merged into something bigger, their skills will come over, and we won't lose their skills and their expertise going forward.
And the other thing is here, gents, is that don't think this is just an amateur radio problem. It's not. It's a society problem, and every hobby, every collective group has the same issue. And I've seen this a lot in the area where I live in the Irish Republic, with sporting clubs. Rural sporting clubs, struggle to attract their members and keep the talent that they get because big organisations are pulling them away. And what's stopping these people being able to, if you like, safeguard their interests is the fact that they won't club together. And rather than you having, as Richard was saying, the hubs, not clubs type of idea, we've still got individual clubs trying to service small communities rather than all the small communities getting together and making a big hub that could take on, a bigger group in that's in the sporting, obviously, context. But in an amateur radio context, why don't you have, county-based or state-based groups, and then all the smaller groups feeding up into it? I think that's a lot of the takeaway from that. So open your mind, guys. Don't be so territorial. Open your mind if you're in a struggling situation. As well, if you're positive and you're seeing a struggling club, maybe there's something that they can do for you as an outreach. Maybe they could be your, you're not great on CW. Let them be your CW club, or their CW people that they've got strength in, and help them grow, and they can take over that part of the hobby, and then you can carry on doing what you want to do in your club and bring them along as part of that process. So yeah, certainly something there. Great, guys, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So do the usual thing, go to icqpodcast.com and send us a link, and Dad, I'm sure you'd be happy to hear what other people think and what other people's ideas are on how to help these things grow.
Certainly would, Colin, and it's all about development. It's all about getting out there and getting the word out.
Very true. Well, you've only got a year, Dad, so you've got to come up with the next one for the HF convention.
We've been invited then.
I don't know yet, but I've got a gut feeling we will. So let's do our thank yous for this episode. So we'd like to thank our monthly and subscription donors this episode for, as I say, keeping this advert free. As always, if you found value in the show and what we've done with the feature this episode in relation to clubs, feel free to send whatever you find as value our way. Certainly, I know there was a bit of cost involved in us doing that, international flights and lots of production work, etc. So anything sent our way is always greatly appreciated. I'd like to thank the guys who took part in the news round today with your dad. So that's Chris, Mike 0, Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike 0, Sierra Golf Lima, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, Ed, DD5 Lima Papa, and Bill, November 3, Juliet India X-Ray, for taking part in the news round table with you. Thanks a lot for that there. Guys, check out the YouTube channel because there's new content out there. There's video from that feature will be there for you to view as well. And as I say, certainly feel free to share that with people that might find it interesting or find it easy to consume in video form. You can find all our videos that we've been doing recently at UK Hamfest, and as I say, it's at RSGB convention at youtube.com/ICQ podcast. Subscribe to that channel there and make sure we can update you when things are new and alert. I think I've about covered everything off, Dad, have I? I think I've about ticked everything off there. I know you've got a busy weekend as we publish, as you've got students hopefully completing the foundation course in the UK on the new syllabus.
Certainly have, Colin. With a bit of luck, we'll have 6 new foundation licence holders in the UK on Saturday afternoon, so that'll be good. What I will do is apologise again in advance to anybody if the audio in the round table was a bit raggy. We had major issues. Skype decided to do all sorts of bits and pieces on both Martin and my computer, and I lost the ability to record with Audacity. So I was recording a different way, and Skype was doing all sorts of audio processing on us, which was really giving me a hard time. But apologies, but it's more important to get you an episode out on a normal schedule.
Yeah, now guys, we are desperately trying to fix that at the moment, so please bear with us as we try and get it fixed. Well, I'm going to promise you all, guys, I'm not doing a show next week. I'm taking the weekend off. I'm going to take a well-deserved break from releasing shows. So we're going to be doing this in a fortnight's time. So I say it's a cup of tea and a chocolate bicky for Mrs. B tonight, but she's going to have to wait a fortnight's time for an ICQ chocolate biscuit.
Well, she'll get a chocolate biscuit and a cup of tea when she comes in every night, Colin. But she doesn't work every day, but it's good. The only downside is when she's working late and I'm on earlies, she has to make her own tea that time. But no, we'll get there, Colin.
No problem. Well, listen, guys, I'll bid you all 73s, and we'll catch you all again in a fortnight's time. 73s all.
73.